Woo! We are live. Welcome back to another Basement Radio Arcade podcast. This is actually a special BRAP on this beautiful Saturday morning. We have a first-time guest, someone that we're really, really excited to have on, and someone. Actually, I'm a big fan of his work, the channel. We have Paul from Red Gaming Tech joining us today. Paul, thank you so much for joining us on BRAP. We are really looking forward to discussing PC, next generation games, and Xbox Series X, PlayStation 5 hardware with you. And on that note, sir, thank you again. Great to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me. I will also say this is my first time doing any of these type of shows, so this is like virgin territory for me, so ready to screw up.
Yeah, hey, Paul, we are going to keep it informative and entertaining at the same time. It's going to be fun.
I'll try to do one of those.
Yeah, we are going to have a blast. Well, we were already having laughs before we went live, talking about Wednesday's BRAP, which we won't get into. But I don't know. I do want to go and introduce the panel. We also have a B Money and Eric Jackson couldn't make it today, so we have two individuals that are filling in. This individual, if you guys don't remember, for those of you who've been following us from the beginning, we have Holocaust, and Al was actually one of the original panel members many, many years ago on BRAP. Al, dude, great to have you on, man. Glad you could make it, bro.
Thanks for having me on, Enrique.
Absolutely, man. My pleasure. Hopefully you dropped some nuggets today. Maybe
We'll see how it goes.
No doubt, man. And then we also have returning guests. We have the Chosen One, I think he calls himself. We have Optimus Code, aka Dikembe Mutombo, because he's out there blocking people on Twitter like Mutombo does and doing that little finger wave. What's up, Code?
What's up, man? I'm not the chosen one. When did I ever say that?
Did you say that like on your videos? I am the chosen one. I am the I don't know. I forget what your intro.
Oh, I said I am the truth teller. I am the first generation gamer, which means I'm just gonna have honest conversations about all these platforms, especially on trash PC. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't worry, we'll remedy that later.
We're starting early.
I'll give you some spice for those words, man. You're eating them.
I love it. And then we have Gaming Forte. Forte, what is going on, sir?
Nothing. Recovering from all this trash over the last 2-3 days. Good though. How are you?
Doing well, man. Great to see you, man. And then we have Slow-Mo at 90 frames per second. Slow-Mo, haven't seen you. Actually, I haven't seen you guys in a long time.
Wait, why 90 frames per second, Slow? I got to start with you at that. Why 90 frames? What about 120? Don't nobody run at 90 frames per second. That's not a benchmark. What's that number?
90 frames per second is right where you just stop noticing when the frames dip and go high and all that stuff. So it's just like everything is just smooth at that point.
Okay.
That's where I like to sit. Okay.
I'll put my fangs in. I won't show fangs. Okay, cool. I just wanted to know. I was wondering.
That's plus is like it's a frame rate that 99% of consoles aren't going to hit anytime soon.
Woo!
So it's a little joke.
You mean 60 for that?
Oh yeah, 60.
Whoa, yeah.
You want to give a little? I might change my nickname so it's just like it's over. It's just a little joke to rile people up. You know?
Well, at least the console gamers got something to play with they 60 frames.
Yeah, I got other games too.
Whoa,
I just played them better.
Last time I checked, Gears Tactics was only on PC.
Woo!
Oh no!
Whoa!
Yeah, but the wonderful Gears Tactics.
Oh, don't slander, sir. Great game.
Hey, that's actually a really good game.
I've loaded it up to benchmark it. If that makes you like I know the benchmark at this point.
See, Paul, this is the issue with Code comes on. He tries to dog PC. Now, Paul, let me ask you something. I'm going to get to your gaming history here, but I do want to ask you a question. What is the best platform to game on?
For me, PC, but it's just easy. Personally, I think it's kind of like whatever you prefer.
But it is PC, though.
Absolutely. This man gets it. Best is a subjective term, man. It's just going to depend on your circumstance.
Technically, PC.
Woo! That's all we need to know. Technically,
exactly. Man, PC is superior in almost every category, but the superior thing is not always the best thing.
Exactly, it's whatever you prefer. I mean, one of my friends just has like an Xbox One and he's been gaming on it forever, and he has no intention of even getting the Xbox One X because he was like, I don't care. I just want to play the games. I don't want to spend more money. I just want to play on the game, and that's it.
That's smarter than what we are.
Yeah, I mean, Al, you're a PC gamer, right? I mean,
I got everything. I mean, every console that's been out since 1981, I own in my house.
Tell them, Al. Don't try to limit Al.
But I love PC gaming. I'm not gonna lie. I would recommend anyone try PC gaming. It's not for everybody. The platform is fantastic, especially as far as emulation goes, and holding on to those games, the systems that we can't get anymore.
When you say emulation, do you mean piracy or do you mean like legit?
Legit emulation.
Okay.
But not like. Granted, that Super Mario 64 source code thing was incredible work, but I wouldn't condone anyone downloading it. But just for game preservation, I think.
It's really handy.
I like that game preservation. That's a good way to put it.
You know, game preservation is running Breath of the Wild at 144 frames per second. That's what I call preservation.
Yeah, well, I made my own Breath of the Wild ISO from an actual Wii U disc. Myself.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
It is incredible. Yeah, I mean, I love the PC platform. It's probably my preferred platform right now. But I'm not going to discredit any of the other platforms. I love them all.
Consoles are trying to do nothing but be PCs now anyway. So you might as well go with the better common denominator when it comes to that.
That is false. Consoles are not trying to be PCs. Consoles are improving in their ability to generate awesome gaming experiences. It's like Blade, right? Consoles are like Blade, all of their strengths, but none of their weaknesses. And so this is what the console is to a PC.
I would say that the fixed platform kind of makes it the weakness. It all depends, though, on what you're trying to do, to me. Like, PCs are perfect if you're willing to consistently upgrade them, and like if you want to do emulation or you want to do like game modding, that type of thing. But if you only care about just putting the disc in the system, I think consoles are the way to go. But then I own like all the consoles and a PC.
Yeah, it was funny. Some of his little PC brethren was giving him slack for playing Final Fantasy Remake at 30 frames a second.
But you know what? Hey, look, I will always prioritize the games over the hardware or the, you know how these guys are. They worship the plastic, which is weird to me, but it is what it is. But Final Fantasy VII Remake is an amazing game. It's my game of the year so far, and I wasn't going to pass that up, even though I know it's coming out on PC next year, like April 2021. I'm not passing that up. I'm not going to wait. I played it at 30 frames per second, but it's a locked 30 frames. And, while I'm playing the game, I don't really think or consider about the fact that it's a 30 frames per second game. I'm just enjoying the amazing character models, the great combat that they developed for a game that was originally turn-based, and the changes they made to the story that I really enjoyed. I know some people are kind of on that. When I made a video about that, I got to see a side of the Final Fantasy community that I didn't know about, like the really rabid side that kind of makes me want to get a restraining order put out on some people, but but it is what it is. Like, I understand people's their enthusiasm for certain genres and certain IP, but like that game's amazing, and I'm still going to get it on PC too. Like, it's that good. I'm going to get it on PC.
Did you happen to play it on release when it was on the PS1? Did you happen to play it on release?
Yeah. I was in 10th grade when that happened back in the day, and I played it then. I've been a big Final Fantasy fan, period. Like, my first Final Fantasy was technically Final Fantasy 4 in Japan, but over here in America, it was Final Fantasy 2. I played that on the Super Nintendo, and I played Final Fantasy 3, which was Final Fantasy 6, and Chrono Trigger. So I was all in on Square. The reason why I went to PlayStation primarily as my platform back then over the Nintendo 64 was because Square said, all of our games are going to show up on PlayStation. I was like, well, guess I'm getting a PlayStation because that's where I I'm going to play my games. And Final Fantasy VII blew up mostly due to the full motion video cutscenes and the marketing that really kind of fooled people into thinking, oh, this is what the game looked like. Then they played the game, it was like, But then, there were some people who actually really enjoyed it, had never played an RPG before, and were like, wow, this is different. I like this. But I was already all in well before then.
Yeah, the one thing that people don't realize is the reason that I don't have a problem with a 30 frame per second game, because not as long as it's a steady and consistent frame rate, it's not bad. I mean, Bungie made a living off of the original Halo game, and the reason people said it played so well is because it consistently ran at a 30 frames per second clip without any drops or anything. So if you can give me, and I'm not saying I want 30 frames per second, but if you're going to give it to me, at least give me a consistent experience where I'm not feeling like I'm going to gag every 2 seconds because your game's dropping to 18 frames.
So then people were used to the GoldenEye at like the 13 frames per second.
Exactly.
Don't talk shit about GoldenEye.
now to clarify something my boy Sir Taz in the chat just asked me, I did not notice the frames. I noticed it was running at 30 frames per second, but it's a locked 30 frames, so it wasn't as bad as like dropping to, like, you guys remember how PUBG was when it first came out on the Xbox. It would drop down into like 15 frames per second, sometimes single digits. Like, that's unplayable. Final Fantasy VII Remake
away with making a game like that.
Yeah, it doesn't stutter, it doesn't skip. There are no frame drops in that entire 40-minute, 40-hour campaign. So it's
Real quick, guys, I gotta pay the bills here. We have Hardcore Metal 89 with the $5 super chat. Thank you, sir. Says, shout out to Brett Panel. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Meet so much. Hey, big shout out to everyone in the live chat, by the way. I did drop a link in the chat, so please retweet, share it with your friends, and hit that like button if you haven't done so already. Paul, I think the frames per second conversation we're having right now is probably a good segue getting into next console generation, because, as you know, Paul, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is apparently running at 30 frames per second. And there's been a lot of backlash about this from gamers that feel like, wait a minute, like how is this game running 30 frames per second? These consoles are capable. When I say these consoles, the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 are capable machines. They should be doing 60 frames per second. Do you think this is going to be something that we see happening quite frequently with next generation, with maybe third-party games? Where they don't hit 60 frames per second? Well,
if you watch the Microsoft conferences, they were saying that all games would be like 60 FPS. That was the target. It was kind of like the minimum. But then they somewhat retracted that, and they said it's going to also be down to the game's developers. But as for Assassin's Creed, I'm hearing some mixed things. Some people told me that the engine itself was still not fully leveraging the performance of the next generation, but I don't know if I buy into that. I don't know anyone on the development team to kind of clarify whether that's the case. I mean, it's also worth noting that obviously as the generation continues and we kind of learn more about the systems, or developers kind of get better understanding of the systems, they can probably tap more into it. And I do wonder, for example, on the Xbox, are they using 8 cores and only 8 threads? Are they using all 16 threads of the Xbox? Because obviously there's 2 different modes it can operate in. Are they going to be doing downsampling in the future, or rather upsampling? Will it be 30 frames a second? I think it's going to be dependent on the developer. And also, I really hope developers provide the option for users to choose. But the big issue is we don't know whether it's the CPU which is causing the bottleneck, or the GPU, or whether it's something to do with the way that it's been developed in terms of like programming or optimization.
Yeah, Paul, have you heard how good the system is at task switching?
For what, sorry?
The Xbox, the Series X. Have you heard anything at all about how good the system is at task switching? When you're waiting and the threading is going and a thread finishes and you need to switch from one thread to the next, like, is there a bottleneck where everything is just held up waiting, or is the system good at switching and resuming in the middle of its work? Have you heard anything along those lines?
A few things. I've heard that it's improved. but I don't know how it compares to the PlayStation. Most of my sources have been more PlayStation focused. A couple of devs did whisper to me stuff like the Xbox is significantly improved over, let's say, the Xbox One X, and you can kind of see some of this just in what they've been doing with the betas for the Xbox One. But I don't know how that specific feature is improved. I can't really give you an answer. Only that I know in general it's improved, but I can't give you specific answers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
And by the way, everyone in the live chat, if you have a question for Paul, please let us know. And panel members, please feel free to jump in as well. But I think Code, I think you mentioned, because someone in the live chat said, Vatsu N said, didn't someone say it's running DX11? That's why I think you mentioned that, Code, that perhaps it's because
what's his name on Twitter? He's a current game dev on Twitter. He posted the article. He posted that little graph slow-mo. You remember you had posted the video about a 2080 Ti running Odyssey, and it was averaging like 48 frames or whatever it was. And you had found a video where some guy was able to consistently get 60.
Yeah. He was using he had an i9 9900K overclocked CPU. I think he was actually running 16 gigs of RAM, but he had a 2080 Ti as well, and he was getting native 4K and 60 frames. It was averaging like 58, but it was 60 frames per second basically.
Yeah.
But but like I watched his full video, it didn't dip under 57 the entire time, and he was using ultra settings. So I seen that video a while ago and just assumed that 2080 Ti with that engine that Ubisoft is using for the Assassin's Creed games was just always able to hit that. But I didn't notice that other people weren't getting that level of frame rate with that game before.
Yeah, I can verify firsthand that those are my settings, slow-mo, and that's exactly what happens. My system literally screams trying to do 60 at ultra settings at 4K with my 9900K.
They've written an article and they did a chart, and basically, I guess on average, I don't know, like you said, I don't know what CPU they use, but on average, it hits about 45 frames per second on Ultra in full 4K. And it was linked directly to DirectX 11. And
I had heard DX11 as well, but but the person who told me it, they DM'd me, and I'm like, I don't know if I trust you. I did mention it in a video, but I did say I was kind of skeptical. Like, at the end of the day, someone can say something, but unless they're on the dev team, I'm always like, maybe.
Yeah. So I
have full confidence that once they upgrade to DX12, I think things are going to get better. Microsoft is investing a lot of resources into integrating DX12U with the platform, and I think we're going to see a lot of good things from that.
Yeah, it's a great point, Code. So Paul, do you think, I mean, in terms of next generation, because I think a lot of us think that, I think many people from what I've seen on Twitter, maybe Twitter's maybe not the best benchmark to use, but I think the expectation is, these consoles are very powerful. I've seen people compare Xbox Series X. I've had people tell me, Enrique, your PC is going to be obsolete. Your 2070 is going to be trash compared to Xbox Series X. And to that I say, I kind of play around and joke and say, well, I've already experienced next gen. You guys are just welcome to the party, right? But do you think that it's reasonable to expect, though, that we're going to see like 60 frames per second, native 4K, or is it going to be kind of just across the board? like basically like what Code has been saying, at the end of the day, it's up to the developers. I think first party will see some of that stuff, but from I think third party perspective, do you still think it's going to be kind of left to them and how they, decide, do they want to go native 4K, 30 FPS, or they want to go 60 frames and maybe do upscaling or something? I mean, what do you think is going to happen in terms of games next gen? I mean, are we really going to see that 60 FPS that everybody wants?
I think it's going to depend heavily on the game, but I think people are getting really hung up on the native resolution. You may have seen like DLSS 2. What NVIDIA have been doing with that. Yeah. Now, if, for example, excuse me, you're rendering a game at like 1080p, which is obviously an extreme difference from like 4K. It's a quarter of the pixels, but DLSS 2 can upsample it to not quite native quality, but not too far off. So it's not difficult to assume that we could be seeing, like, just for example, 1440p or I don't know, 1800p, and then upsampling the difference. And if it's a case of like, well, you can have more pixels natively, or you can have fewer, but then it's upsampled, but then those pixels which you started with are just at higher quality, maybe have better hardware-based ray tracing or whatever they decide to do. I think that's probably more likely. I think as developers get more used to it, obviously Microsoft have been very boisterous about the upsampling technology of the next generation Xbox, and it's looking to be really good. It's still, however, unlike let's say NVIDIA, which is running on the tensor cores of Turing and soon Ampere, it still needs to be run on the GPU compute units. So the problem is, I still don't know how much of an overhead that is. And also, we don't know so much about the algorithm and how it's upsampling or what the quality is like. But I imagine, my personal opinion is we will see games hit 4K 60, but it's going to depend heavily on the game. I personally think, though, that a lot of AAA titles, especially in a couple of years, especially, for example, Microsoft's first-party ones, they're probably going to render internally at a lower resolution and then use upsampling technology, because, to be honest, it's just a smarter way to go.
Hey, Paul, have you, so with Microsoft's upsampling, like, do they have the neural net running on the GPU, or are they doing everything in development so that they're training the net before the game is released? Do you know what their strategy is for that?
I've only heard what really was said in the Eurogamer article and a few other bits. I know that the GPU itself has significantly higher compute performance in terms of, just compared to RDNA 1. So it seems like it's basically, I guess, upsampling in runtime. But I'm assuming it must be trained some way or the other, because obviously Microsoft have been really pushing that. We saw some deep learning technology with Forza. I think it was Forza, and it looked really impressive.
Yeah, Forza.
So I'm assuming it's going to be kind of similar to that, but ultimately Microsoft are playing it really close to their chest.
That's smart, I guess. Okay, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Paul,
not very good answer, but still.
Paul, so I heard you talk about PC a little bit. We talked about DLSS 2.0, which, Al, by the way, I got to thank you, sir, for pointing me the direction of PC as well. Thank you, sir, because it's been the best.
Don't worry about it.
Best purchase ever. I should have listened to you earlier, bro.
No, it's all right. Again, it's not for everybody. I love it, though.
Yeah, me too. I don't think I can ever go back. It's
hard.
Yeah, it really is.
I stand by my words. You'll never look at third-party games the same way again.
Oh, absolutely. Al, when I fired up Metro Exodus on PC, wow.
Oh, different experience.
Yeah, different experience.
Same with The Witcher 3. Same with Dark Souls. This is before the remastered version, obviously.
Yeah.
You just get a superior all-around experience for the most part.
Well, I think Code was talking about the whole 30 versus 60 on Twitter. And he was like, "Hey, ask Brap. He's playing Sekiro, and
I'm playing it now. I just finally got the PC version yesterday because it was on sale. I didn't have the heart to rebuy it at full price until I waited."
Yeah. Now, Al, different experience though, right? On PC versus playing on console.
Yeah. Frame pacing issues are completely eliminated. If you're running at such a high frame rate and stuff, I'm running at like 144 frames a second. It's insane. It's insane. It's a different experience.
So, Brad, tell people, did the frame rate difference affect your ability to perform in the game or not?
Yes.
I
felt playing that game, and this is why I'm glad Al could speak to this now, and because I felt like I was cheating. Like it was so much more responsive, like the parrying, the blocking. I'm like, whoa! I've been doing the same thing on PlayStation 4, and now I'm doing it on PC, and it just works better on PC. It's so much more. It's more fluid.
Input latency is so much better.
Exactly, Paul. Yeah, that input latency is so much better. And like Al, you said, like the frame pacing issues are like non-existent, and it's such a more it's a better experience. It's like, to me, that's playing that version on PC to me what the vision of the developer, how they intended that game to be played, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, but Paul, I do have a question regarding a PC Master Race. You know, this question, and I heard you talk about this on Twitter one time, or I saw you mention this on Twitter, that because people are always comparing the Xbox Series X to like a 2080 Ti, and I believe you said something to the effect that you really can't compare like a console GPU, I think, to a PC GPU. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly, the exact words you used. But that's kind of been a topic that's come up recently. Like, how does this game compare to, or not game, but how does that hardware or the Series X compare to PCs, more specifically like the RTX GPUs that we have out now from NVIDIA?
So I think if it's the conversation if it's the conversation I think you're talking about, I was getting rather frustrated because people were talking about the TFLOPS. Yes. And it actually makes me want to like smash my face through the desk until the pain stops.
Man, tell me.
Teraflops.
Yes, it terrorizes me. That's what those TFLOPS are doing. And it's like there's a lot of issues with it. The first is that they're comparing RDNA 1 and then using those as comparisons against Turing, which is obviously what RTX 20 series are. But then you've also got overheads for PC, which are just not present in consoles, of course. And then you've got different programming techniques. But overall, also, it's very difficult to say what's going to happen with the next generation of games, because it's all very well and good to say, well, a game on, let's say, an RTX 2080 Ti behaves like this, and a game on an RTX 2070 behaves like this. But you can't necessarily employ that, at least in my opinion, to the next generation, especially when we are looking at what the insanity of like Unreal Engine can do, just for the sake of argument. And that's not to say that there is no comparison. That's not to say that PCs have completely different separate architecture to a console. But I just think that when people are trying to make direct comparisons, it's a bit difficult. Like, I did a comparison of an RX 5700, which is 36 compute units, and compared it against Polaris, which has also 36 compute units at the same clock frequency. So you can see like IPC jumps from one generation to the other. But you can't then imply what's going to happen with a console with that. You can kind of use it as an example of how one generation of architecture is going to be different from another. But what customizations are on the consoles? Are there any bottlenecks on the consoles? What bottlenecks on the PC? Obviously, a lot of PC games are still using DX11, which is not exactly well known for optimization. And it's just quite difficult to do those like for like comparisons. You can get like a ballpark figure. I just don't think that you can directly compare a PC and console architecture.
Yeah, because
for weeks and no one will listen, man. You might have to repeat that like 80 more times.
Or don't, because it's not like they're going to listen anyway.
They won't listen. They're not going to listen. I mean, Code put out the Pancake Chef, which was an awesome example. I think no one read that. I don't know if you see the Pancake Chef that Code put out, but it's like, it's a great example, and no, I don't think anyone really read that, Code.
They argue over specs. I'm sick of it.
Yeah, but I asked a question, Paul, because you always hear that. Oh, well, you got to spend $2,000 to get the performance of a Xbox One Series X. Blah blah blah. PC. But what you're saying, it's not really an apples to apples type thing.
Well, here's the thing. Like, you could have like an i7 8700K that you've had for a couple of years now, or you could even pick up like a 3600X, or you could buy whatever. And you've got more than enough CPU grunt to run the GPU, because ultimately, in 90% of PC games, you're GPU bound. So really, it comes down to the GPU and what your preference is in terms of resolution. I think, to get back to what I was saying earlier about DLSS, it's like you're going to be able to upsample anyway. There are questions that you could ask yourself in terms of the amount of RAM you're going to need in a couple of years' time. But one of the things that's been really good about PCs is that the price to high-end components has gone up significantly. But if you want to just play like mid-range games, you can still pick up some really good bargains, at least in my opinion. Like the The AMD 5600 series is really impressive.
Yeah.
Turing has also come down. The 2060 Super is just ridiculous. I got sent a 2060 Super by MSI because I'm using it for some testing, and it's just like insane, really, for what performance you've got. It's not that much slower than a 1080 Ti, at least in comparison, and the performance is just ridiculous on it. So I mean, yes, it is. PC gaming is more expensive than a console. I'm not gonna lie to you; that's just an undeniable fact. But I think once you've set yourself up with the platform, if you purchase like an 8700K or a 2700X or something like that, you're going to be good for the next 2 or 3 years. And that platform,
Right.
you could have had it since like 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I always try to tell people, because I remember when I first built my PC originally back in like 2011, and I was still running the AMD 8350 and stuff. And then when I finally upgraded, I went to an 8700K like 4 years ago. And now I'm at a point where I want to upgrade that. But it's like my PC has taken so many different turns over the course of the last 10 years. It doesn't seem like I put that much money into it because I'm doing it so sparingly across time. Like, I'm going to do the GPU this year. I don't have to do my CPU this year. I could probably keep that another year or so before that becomes some type of CPU bound. But it's like, once you're in, it's like just continuing just to upgrade when you need to upgrade. And you're always kind of current because you're never really outpacing anything when you're on PC.
Yeah. I think that's very true. I mean, I do have friends. One friend bought an 8700K, so I do have friends that upgrade all the time. One friend bought an 8700K, and then they bought the 8086 anniversary edition. Then they bought a 9900K. Then they bought another 9900K to.
Oh, they just got money to burn. They just got money to burn.
Yeah,
that's money to burn right there.
Yeah, he had two 1080 Ti's, and he swapped them both for 2080 Ti. Then he got a second 2080 Ti. Then he put the 28. I'm just like, dude, what are you doing? But he's rich, so he's happy to do it. But most people cannot afford to do that. It's and most people don't need to do that. But even he, at the moment, on his 9900K, he's like, yeah, I'm out. I'm not buying any new CPUs. Like, there's not enough of an upgrade.
Yeah. I just look at it and I'm like, so even if you want to like upgrade your stuff, like the secondhand market for a lot of this stuff is still super generous in the pricing. Like, I can like turn around and still sell my 8700K for $250 to $300 and be literally like $150 off the top of the line Intel. Well, not the top of the line, but close to the top of the line Intel card when it comes to the consumer grade. And then my 1080 Ti hybrid still goes for $550 on eBay, like consistently. Wow. That's half the price of a 2080 Ti. Well, it's actually more than half the price of a 2080 Ti. Yeah. So you always have options, and I feel like you get more bang for your buck when you do it in that regard.
Man, what Forte mentioning price just now, it kind of brought up a question I was going to have for Paul. Do you think when
real quick,
Slow-Mo,
I don't mean to interrupt you, Ben. I got to get some super chats real quick.
Okay.
I don't want to miss them. We have Sean with the $2 super chat says, I see Code has been paying attention to Microsoft dev shows. And then we have Justin Maroney with a $10 super chat says, thank you, sir. Says, this chat is being way too civilized. Someone please attack Forte for no good reason at all.
Screw you, Forte. I've never spoken to you until today, but screw you anyway. I don't like the color of your shirt.
So what I was going to ask was about pricing, as we talked, because Forza just mentioned the price of what a 2080 Ti costs right now, which is I think a lot of people feel is a bit overpriced. But when you don't have any other competition at that level, of course, NVIDIA can price things however they want. Do you think with the way AMD is trying to put pressure in that realm of high-end GPUs, discrete GPUs, that NVIDIA will release the 3080 Ti just as overpriced as the 2080 Ti was?
No, that's an interesting question. You see, it was like AMD, to quote The Rock from WWE, there was two things that AMD could do when NVIDIA launched Turing. The first was nothing, and the second was like it. They basically just handed them the performance crown. They could technically have produced a larger die variant of RDNA, but they just didn't, for whatever reason. But to answer your question in terms of will they go cheaper, I'm hearing really good things of RDNA too. Really good things. Whether it's going to be faster than NVIDIA, to be honest, it doesn't actually really matter. It's whether it can put them under enough pressure. There was that leaked benchmark that, let's just call it the 6800 or whatever it ends up being, 6900. And apparently it's around 30-ish% faster than RTX 2080 Ti. And that was early engineering sample. That dated back, I think it was January or February of this year. So obviously the clock speed was not exactly indicative of what we're going to see with retail samples. So my personal opinion, also based on, there was a roadmap image leaked from, released by AMD, and it basically showed that there was going to be a 50% improvement per performance per watt with the next generation of RDNA as well. And with 80 compute units in the next generation, plus as well what we're seeing the both next generation consoles hit in terms of clock frequencies, I think NVIDIA can be under a lot of pressure. But I think NVIDIA also knows that they're going to be facing pressure from the consoles anyway. And I think they're going to have to be more conscientious of that. They know that the next generation consoles, let's just say that they do end up being $500. It's going to be really tempting for people to just say, screw it, I'm going to pick up an Xbox Series X or whatever, and then just kind of skip over GPUs for a while. So I think NVIDIA will double down on tech like DLSS. I think it's its way to kind of get people up like an extra performance tier. After all, they're now trying to make it easier to run DLSS code. Like for games developers, it's now essentially a kind of a unified neural net so that you can run you don't need to specifically train the AI, the neural net, to be able to handle a specific game. It's a lot more generic. So I think that's, it basically, NVIDIA announced that, and they've also said that it's they're still improving it, but beforehand, if you wanted to do like control, it would basically need to I don't know all the specifics, because obviously some of this is intellectual property of NVIDIA, but from what little they did specifically state, they basically had to retrain a neural net from pretty much the ground up per game. But with this,
that's the most sense,
But with this, they don't need to do that. It's now kind of at the point where the input of the developers is a lot less, and the actual time to train the game is also a lot less.
Can I get a link to that, Paul? I would love to read up on that if you can find one.
Yeah,
I'll
me too,
send it to you later on, if that's okay.
But is the performance of that like a generic a generic net? Is that the same performance as you would get with DLSS 2.0 with control? And
it's DLSS 2. That's how they've done it.
Oh, that is okay.
That's one of the implementations of DLSS 2. So DLSS 2. So basically, you have training and you inference with deep learning. So training is obviously where the neural network's actually figuring out what to do. So what NVIDIA do is that they have an 8K reference image, or was it 16K? It's either 8 or 16K reference image. And then obviously, as the images try to be generated by DLSS, it's like, no, that's not right. No, that's not right. No, that's not right. And eventually it spits out the correct image, and then it gets kind of a passing star, a gold star, and it feels all happy about itself. And then that positive reinforcement is what continues to drive the neural net to actually figure out what it's doing. It's basically like teaching your child how to like write or whatever. And so once that's done, that trained code is obviously then provided in an NVIDIA driver as a small little, update. And then that is what's run on the GPU. That's inference. So what NVIDIA did is that the neural network is a lot more generic now. It's a lot faster at training the code, but it's also more accurate. But they've also leveraged and better utilized the tensor cores of the Turing architecture. So even if they're running DLSS code, they've also allowed it so that DLSS has more options. So you can run like different quality settings. It can upsample from 1080p to 4K, or even 540p to 1080p. And beforehand, I believe it was way more limited than that.
Wow.
But so not only is it more efficient, it can sample from a much lower resolution. and it also is almost as fast, if not as fast, in most cases. So it's really impressive what NVIDIA have done. Like, no BS. I think without the ray tracing technology that NVIDIA really pushed, it would have made development of the next generation games a lot harder. I think it's really helped kind of get their head around things, especially, for example, Epic, when they were developing Unreal Engine, like the beta for Unreal Engine and Unity. It actually was obviously for some time now supporting ray tracing via NVIDIA's technology, but that was also like now also for the next generation consoles as well. Obviously, DXR. It was kind of interesting to me. It just how all of this is all coming together.
Yeah.
That you mentioned Epic, I did have a question about that Unreal Engine 5 demo wasn't using ray tracing, but it was using Epic's new Lumen technology. Is that
correct?
Like potentially a substitute for ray tracing, or is it like?
I heard that was software-based ray tracing.
It is.
Yeah, it's all software.
Okay, but so definitely less demanding on the hardware than hardware-based ray tracing, right?
Yeah, so the purpose from that, Lumen is basically like real-time global illumination. I'm actually working on a video of that now, but long story short, Lumen was designed to run on a wider range of hardware without such big demands. And ray tracing is obviously a massive subject, and there's a couple of different types. You've got pixel-based ray tracing or hybrid-based ray tracing, excuse me, like we have with RTX technology, which is really what we see with games like Control. And obviously that is still very demanding. It uses still very complicated algorithms. That's what the RT cores of the Turing architecture essentially does. It figures out how rays intersect with different geometry and how light essentially bounces around, it interacts with the scene. But then with this technology, it has three different, essentially it's mapping things in three different ways. So if it's going, for example, with larger objects, it's using kind of like a voxel-based mapping system. So essentially it's more, I guess you could say, less accurate, but smaller objects, it is more accurate. But it's still running like a software-based solution on the GPU. And this is something that's new for Unreal Engine 5 because, as we were saying earlier, the hardware-based solutions are already in the Unreal Engine 4 betas, which developers have been using. After all, that's what Microsoft are using for Hellblade 2. Is UE4.
But why would you ever use a software-based solution when you have one in hardware that you can get for basically free?
It's not free. It still eats up a lot of compute performance. So, from what my understanding is, the ray tracing on Microsoft's GPU is much like Sony's. So you have a certain number of intersections that obviously the GPU can, I suppose, calculate. But while those calculations are still done on the GPU, you still have to then actually run the ray tracing itself on the compute units. So it's still a lot more expensive than this particular solution. I mean, after all, I interviewed AdShare recently, who produced Local Ray, and their solution is also kind of interesting as well. It's also a software-based solution. It can run even on smartphones. Obviously, not quite as accurate as like a high-end like 5700 XT or something like that, but it's still fairly impressive. So with Lumen, basically, there's three different specific techniques. There's screen space traces, and they're for smaller objects like debris. And then, as I said, if you've got like large objects, like let's say a mountain range or something like that, you've got voxel traces. And then I think from memory, it's a mesh sign distance field, and they're for like larger objects, like, I don't know, like a medium-sized statue in front of it. So each of those basically, it's just a way to reduce the load on the GPU, and it's not really to replace hardware-based ray tracing. I mean, I'm guessing here that it's going to be working in conjunction with hardware-based ray tracing, depending on what the developers are doing.
So, like, is there a threshold on the number of bounces that you can get, or is it? just unlimited? Like, what's the deal here? What are they talking about with that? With Lumen, I mean, in particular.
I don't know. They've not stated. It's also going to depend on the hardware itself, I imagine.
So it will scale. The better hardware, you can get more bounces, you think?
And also, more to the point, how much you're willing to kind of throw into the scene, which is really, what you have to, because there'll still be levels of detail. On the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series Xbox Series X, the PlayStation 5 can handle 380 billion intersections with hardware-based ray tracing, whereas the PlayStation 5 can handle about 321 billion. But that's using the RT cores on the GPUs. So obviously, that's an awful lot, but it's still going to eat into a lot of performance budget on the GPU. Ultimately, no one really knows what developers are going to use. This is just like an option. It's still not as good as hardware-based ray tracing. It isn't as accurate. There were some issues with it. You can actually look at the demo if you look at it in slow motion and specific scenes. It's especially, for example, when the light caves in. Sorry, the ceiling caves in. You can see some issues, and also when the light is reflecting on all of the statues with the shields, it takes a second, so it's still not quite as accurate. But it still looks bloody good. I mean, it looks way better than what a static effect would look like, and that's really, to me, the driving force for the next generation is like more of a more dynamic gameplay, I suppose.
Yeah,
and it's also not finished yet because it's not available to developers until next year, right?
Correct. I mean, they've only said there's 2 features. I think there was Nanite and then there was Lumen. Yeah, Lumen, but there's no way. There's no way in hell that they're shipping with only 2 new features for UE5. But they've said that it's essentially a taster, but also a lot of stuff is still on lockdown because obviously the next generation consoles, there's still a lot we don't know about them.
Yeah. Paul, real quick, I got a couple questions for you. A couple of super chats, as a matter of fact. We have Keyup901 with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Keyup901, for the super chat. The question for Paul. Question is, Paul, how do you think devs will code for SSDs on PC in terms of game design compared to next gen consoles?
Now that is a $64 billion question. I think it's going to be a transition period. I think one of the things that Microsoft have obviously done very well, as Optimus was saying earlier, is DirectX 12 Ultimate. And obviously some of that technology like sampler feedback is going to be really helpful for that, because obviously it better enables developers to kind of stream in assets, and just ultimately that's going to be really important. The thing is, if you look at SSDs, there are a couple of different types on PC. Obviously, you've got NVMe SSDs, which have PCIe 3 and PCIe 4 technology, and you've also got SATA. I think you can probably get some ideas looking at the specs of Microsoft Flight Simulator, where it was like 32 gigabytes of recommended RAM for the very highest quality settings. Because it's not just the SSD and the next generation consoles that's the problem. It's the overhead of the CPU. Like, streaming in all of those assets are extremely intensive. There's a reason that both Sony and Microsoft incorporated tech to specifically decompress data on the fly. And I think that SSDs, long story short, I think SSDs in consoles are going to push that for PCs. I think it's going to be necessary to have an NVMe SSD in a couple of years if you want to play at the highest quality games, high quality setting in games. But I also think most likely 32 gigabytes of RAM, we're going to have to just run over to it and hug it. Say thank you very much.
That's why I got 64 gigs, baby.
There you go.
Even if you did have an NVMe 4 SSD, you're still going to need the hardware decompression that's not available. What do you think the solution for that's going to be?
Well, once again, that's a question that no one really 100% knows. It could be the decompression technology is essentially just baked in to either the SSD on the PC itself, or it could be baked into another component on the PC. But then again, PCs, they've got this thing, it's called brute force, so they could just basically smash their face against it. I mean, just in like 2 years' time, for example, like, you can imagine that a CPU, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that we're going to have 12 or 16 core processors. And it's like it does eat up like 5 CPU cores or whatever of the consoles to decompress things, but those things are only running at like 3.5 gigahertz Zen 2 cores. So I think a Zen 4 core or what have you running at like 5 gigahertz, it's not probably going to be anywhere near as taxing. But obviously, we can only wait and see.
So
at the end of the day,
you think the gap between the console CPU and an actual i9 or whatever that you can get on their PC is so much greater that it can afford to do the hardware decompression without the same hit that the console CPUs would take?
well, the PCs do have a large overhead for the OS anyway, because obviously Windows is not exactly lightweight at the best of times.
Yeah.
But I think that PCs in the short term will have to just suck it up and deal with it. But I think that because PCs, I don't think it's going to need to stream in as much data anyway from the SSD, simply because PCs can just have such a large pool of RAM. Like, almost every gaming PC now has like 16 gigs, and most GPUs now are sold with 8 gigs. So it's not really that difficult to imagine in a couple of years or even next year, 32 gigabytes is just going to be like, yeah, whatever. Like, it's not that expensive to buy 32 gig sets now.
No.
So I think that's one way to do it. But ultimately, I think it's going to come down to the game's developer.
Yeah.
That's great insight, Paul. And we do have another question for you. $2 $2.50 super chat from One Typical Latino. Thank you, sir. Says, what benchmarks will we reach in a Decade 4 gaming? Not sure.
That is going to depend. I suppose that also depends on what you're defining as a benchmark.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's going to be immersion. I think we're at that point where graphics look great, but I think it's going to be down to immersion. And I think what I mean by immersion, just to be really clear, is a lot of games. You guys are a little bit older like me. You remember maybe playing like Grand Theft Auto, like the early GTAs or what have you, and you remember when you were driving like 100 miles an hour down the road, and you'll be like, you hit like a tiny little concrete fence, or like it's like a white picket fence, and you'll just go through the windshield. You're like, I didn't know it would behave like that.
Right.
But obviously, with the next generation of games, I think it's going to be a lot more iterative. I think the game world, because one of the benefits of like Nanite is that it essentially reduces the workload on developers, because basically you can import models directly from like ZBrush or whatever, and the engine itself creates different LOD versions of the model depending on the distance. It's all automated for the developer, assuming what Epic have said is true, which obviously they wouldn't lie. So that basically means that developers don't need so many artists working the game, but it also means with how they've created the demos, it's a lot more interactive, like light bounces around better. You can obviously have much vaster open worlds. But from what I understand, speaking to a couple of people, there's a really good couple of interviews I had with NVIDIA's Neil Trevor on this. And obviously he knows way more about this than I do. And he was saying that he thinks that in the next couple of years, we're going to start to move towards way better AI in games, which is obviously kind of part and parcel of the next generation of gaming. But it's going to be much better worlds, much more open, much more capable. I think you're going to feel like there's a lot less stuff that you should be able to do in a game, but then you just can't. And then you're like, why? You know, that kind of thing where you're trying to drive your car through a bush, and the bush is just like, I was actually created on the planet Krypton, and I'm just gonna like take the tank that's rolling at you. You know, when you just like, you get into like the worst thing on like an open world game is when you get into like a tank or a really powerful vehicle. You're like, yeah, okay, so I'm shooting this little bush. It's like not really doing much to it. So I think actually having destructible physics and interactivity is going to be a really big thing. And I think having also a sense of immersion, which ray tracing, all this other stuff is going to kind of bring. I think it's going to be a lot less of, oh, look, this texture's a lot less, a lot shinier. I think, yes, we're going to have that. But I think, honestly, most of it is going to come down to just the level of interactivity that we have. Whether that's for cloud or not.
I have been talking for, I don't know how long, about like, the key for next gen is being able to do actual next gen design instead of the same games that just look pretty. here.
Exactly.
One of the things I keep mentioning is like AI, and I really do that AI. I mean, with these GPUs, they can put a neural net on the GPU, and the AI can adapt to each player. There's just so much stuff that can be done from a design standpoint that has nothing to do with graphics, as long as that minimum spec is raised high enough so that the dev teams can fully take advantage of some of this newer stuff. And I am fretful that if the minimum spec is too low, all we're going to get is the same games, just prettier. And that just frustrates me to no end.
I really kind of feel like when it comes to especially PCs, that you're going to start seeing minimum specs get raised. I wouldn't surprise me at all by next year that new games coming out are like, look, it's got to be at least a SATA SSD, or it's no dice for you. You can't play this game. You're going to have to upgrade. Sorry. And
I think so as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you remember back in the day, I feel like I'm ancient suddenly, but there were like
that's codes department.
Dude, I look at myself sometimes, like in terms of like what I've done in life, and I'm like, seriously, how did that happen? Like, I remember being like all excited when the Sega Saturn launched. I was all young and like all excited, and now I'm like, oh god, that was 25 years ago. You need to stop. Oh, it's sad. Anyway, as I was saying, I think we all remember this like iterations on hardware, which are incredibly important. So if I'm going to speak about it from a PC perspective, but back in the day, 3D effects just like destroyed everyone because they released voodoo cards.
Remember when they came out? Oh my god!
I remember voodoo cards.
It was like, what is this? My friend, who was a long-time PC gamer, because I bought a PC and a Voodoo 2, and he's like a long-time PC gamer. And I remember he specifically ran down to my house. He lived like, I don't know, half a mile away. And I do mean ran, by the way. Like, no parents and I give him a lift. He literally ran down. And I said, Adam, watch this.
Quake?
He just, no, Half-Life opening sequence.
Oh yeah.
And welcome to the Black Mesa Research Facility. And his mouth just dropped. Like, he was done. My guy was done. And he's like, he was like, I need to buy a Voodoo 2. I need to buy a Voodoo 2. I need to buy a Voodoo 2. And then, of course, we saw other improvements, like we saw hardware TNL with GeForce, which obviously drastically increased the amount of, well, triangles that could be done, and obviously it's offloading it from the CPU. Then, obviously, we started to see a unified architecture where GPUs no longer had fixed function design. And all of these things are massive improvements, which takes a while to kind of trickle in. To me, now, we've got hardware-based ray tracing, and it's just... I think a lot of folks look at a game like, just for example, Control, and they see the shiny looking windows, and that, don't get me wrong, it does look impressive. And I think one of the problems with ray tracing, to show it off, they've been showing like reflective puddles on the street, and it's like consistent. Oh look, there's another shiny puddle. Oh look, there's another puddle. But it's also the ability to have a game world which is dynamic. For example, imagine that you're playing a first person shooter and you can't see around the corner because, well, it's a corner. That's kind of the thing that corner does. But you can actually see, just for example, the reflection of the enemy soldier in like a hubcap, like to a car park. And you're like, oh shit, maybe need to be ready to kind of not get shot in the face. And so those are kind of things which are subtle and they may not sound so impressive, but when you're actually playing them, and playing a game like that, it's like, oh my god, this is amazing.
I hear you.
And I mean, after all, Cerny with his ear fetish, I think we're probably going to see very similar. I'm like, dude, you have a thing for ears. I'm not sure I'm comfortable you understanding that. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, but being serious, it's very interesting because obviously audio is a pretty important sense. So if you can't actually hear what the hell's happening in terms of positional, you're pretty screwed in the game.
Paul, let me ask you a question. And if you can't answer it, that's fine. Just eject if you need to. It's a purely hypothetical question.
Mm-hmm.
that if
Never
there was some
hypothetical with code.
RDNA feature, if there was some RDNA 3 features available on the PS5, what could they possibly be? Like what in what category of features? What's in the chipset that could possibly be in a PS5 if such a thing was even true?
I can't say too much on that because I would have people like pitchfork me in the distance. What I would say, I'm going to say to you instead that if you're highly technically inclined, this is all I'm going to say on the matter. If you're very technically inclined, look at what features are important for, let's say, the next couple of years, which are not necessarily computational based. And that's all I can say. But I'm also, just to clarify, I never said that RDNA 3 is necessarily in the PS5. The way it was explained to me is it could be Sony impacted the AMD roadmap or vice versa. My sources being very cagey. They just said ultimately there is an instruction or instructions that will be in RDNA 3 in the PS5. I also don't know if it's Xbox as well. I do know that there's a unified cache, unified CCX from my understanding in the PS5, and I think it might be in the Xbox.
I don't know what that is. What's a CCX?
So, do you know the Zen 2 architecture at all?
No.
Okay, so basically with Zen 2, you know how it's got obviously up to 16 cores on the desktop?
Yep.
Okay, so it's basically 3 chips underneath the IHS, integrated heat spreader. So one of those chips you can just like nuke in your head because it's basically for IO. It basically is responsible for communication. So just scrap that one. The other 2 are CCDs, which are basically, if you look inside those, each one contains 8 CPU cores, which are Zen 2. Now, those are segmented into CCXs. So 4 cores are in each CCX, and then they've got their own 16 megabytes of level 3 cache for the desktop. So basically what happens is, let's say you have 2 CCXs that obviously are sharing data between one and the other. Let's say you have CCX 0, and it has core 1, and core 1 is like, well, gee, core 5, which is on CCX 1, it was just working on this data that I kind of need. I'm going to need to grab it from CCX1's cache. It obviously can do that. It can communicate and grab that data, but there's a latency associated compared to if it was in its own CCX. And it can just be a few nanoseconds, just to be clear. This is not like a 5-minute delay, but 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 seconds, nanoseconds, excuse me, is still the data being unable to... I use this example in a video, but let's say I gave you a math problem. What's 1 plus 1?
2.
And then, exactly. But what? And then take that value, multiply it by 2. What's the answer?
4.
Exactly. But you have to... But imagine if I said to you, I want you to take the value of A, multiply it by 2. Can you do that?
I need to know what the value is first.
Exactly. And that's the issue with when it comes to latency. If you don't have access to the data, you can't process it. And some jobs are dependent. They work from having one value to another value to another value to another value, which is why that data coherency is so important, A. But B, you also need some jobs to be done in a specific order. Now, I'm not exactly
all the time, Paul. Like, that's normal. You have blocking threads that wait for other threads to finish.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is with CCXs, because the Zen 2 design is not unified, which is what they're doing with Zen 3, the data, it's one of the reasons that AMD are slightly behind Intel in terms of gaming performance, especially when it's going over not going over tons of threads. basically, it's just it's a long, complicated thing that I won't go into because I'll be in. We talk about it for the next 20 minutes. But long story short, the non-unified design of the current Zen 2 CCX is a big problem. You can actually Google like Zen 2 latency, and it will come up with figures, and they're really interesting if you're like geeky. But the long story short is that this is one of the reasons that AMD have changed this for Zen 3. They accidentally leaked it in a YouTube video, which was called something Innovator, I don't know, Insights or something like that, and then they swiftly removed it from the internet. But essentially, that's one of the changes I think that also in the next generation consoles. That's what it was hinted to me anyway.
Hey, Paul. So I'm thinking about the conversation you had on Twitter about this. So you're not saying that it's. I guess what you're saying is that it's not in there, but rather that Sony may have guided AMD to put certain features into whatever's in the PS5 into RDNA 3. Is that? Am I understand that correctly?
Well, Sony have done both. Sony have taken features from a future GPU, like for example, PS4 Pro had Rapid Pack Math, which was in Vega, and a couple of other features as well. But Sony have also done the same, like the number of asynchronous compute engines that was in the GCN line got bumped, so it had 8 aces and 8 Qs per ace for the later GCNs, because what Sony were doing with the PlayStation 4, because obviously the CPU in the console was basically puny, which is one of the reasons it started to shift towards GPU compute. So one of the ways they did that, well, there's a couple. One, they introduced volatile bit in the level 2 cache, and the second is that they increased the amount of compute queues and aces on the GPU, so that way, the idea behind it, to my understanding, speaking to a couple of developers, is that way each CPU core of the PS4 CPU could obviously issue instructions to the GPU, and it basically just made it a lot smoother process. And obviously, that was eventually a change that AMD themselves implemented into their roadmap.
Interesting. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
Go ahead, Ricky. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so PS5, I know you have to tread lightly here, but PS5 does have RDNA 3 features in it. Does the Series X have those same features too?
I don't know enough about the Xbox. I know that there's a lot of custom stuff that Microsoft have not shown for the Xbox. The problem is I don't know what it is. A couple of developers... I have to be really careful how I say this.
Sure, to understand.
Basically, if you've been following me on Twitter, you'll know that I did put out a call for some developers to speak to me for both Sony and Microsoft. And some people got back to me, and they have less access to Xbox hardware, or they know people who work there. And a couple of other people who do have better access to Xbox guys told me stuff. The thing is, I don't like to necessarily regurgitate what I'm told third hand, because ultimately that then reflects on me. And then I'm not saying that I'm 100% right in everything I've ever said, but that means at least I'm comfortable enough to say that I screwed up, fine, I got tricked, or whatever you want to say. But when I'm starting to speak to what someone else told me and what someone else told him, it's kind of like gets really complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's not necessarily the strongest of sources. Therefore, it's like you're kind of like putting your reputation on the line for someone who may be wrong. And then if they're wrong, then in essence, you're wrong as well. That makes sense.
I got a DM just yesterday from someone. I'm not going to say what the topic's about, but it was about... I'm not going to say what specifically the topic was about, but it was something that we've talked about on the show already in regards to the Xbox. And they claim that this is why stuff's happening with the Xbox. But then when I was like, that doesn't make sense to me necessarily. And then I started to do some like kind of research and ask a few people, and they said that doesn't sound... So I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with this at all, and that's why I don't report it. It's very difficult. Sometimes you have to kind of tread this line. Like I've been sitting on a lot of stuff for AMD, and I just don't want to report it because I don't know if it's right. Just for example, one of the things I heard about AMD's RDNA 2, I've mentioned like a billion times now that it's got way more cache on it, much like Ampere has done with. Obviously, they've drastically increased the amount level 2 cache. It's gone to like 40 megabytes, I think. That's from memory, so it could be wrong. But they've also increased the amount of compute performance on the GPU. But I've also heard that the ray tracing performance is actually really impressive. It could be better than Turing, which is another reason.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Because one person told me it was crap. One person initially told me it was trash. It was like, it basically, they would be kissing Nvidia's nutsack to have that level of performance. That's how bad I had it originally. and then
look, he come to the crumb side for 10 minutes. How he talking, man?
Well, this is how I talk to friends. Like they realize, like I've got a kind of a different persona on YouTube. Like I could just hear the demonetized button just going ding.
Oh no, there's been much worse than that said on this show. You're fine,
much
you're
worse,
fine.
much worse.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I can tone myself up then. Level 2, activate. Anyway, but apparently RDNA 2 has actually been performing better, and I knew for quite a while, I leaked this back in March, that AMD wanted to segment their lineup. I put out a video ages ago, so it's not of back then. All I knew is it was a compute-focused card, and then obviously I think it was Komachi who leaked Arcturus' specs to begin with. I'm probably going to get slapped by one of them. It might have been Rogaine, but I'm pretty sure it's Komachi who initially leaked it. Arcturus obviously was based on the Vega architecture, and then RDNA 2, which obviously back then all we knew as Navi Navi 2X. But long story short, that was going to be the gaming focus card, and to my understanding, there was a lot of internal conflict at AMD between Raja Koduri and Lisa Su, and this had to do with allocation of assets and a whole bunch of crap. And long story short, one of the things that Raja had done before he departed AMD was to work on the RDNA architecture to improve it, right? To squeeze the most performance out of it and design it specifically around gaming. But then RDNA 2, obviously, they knew that they were going to be featured behind NVIDIA. After all, NVIDIA have like mesh shaders, variable rate shading, ray tracing. I'm pretty sure the next version, Ampere, is going to make you coffee in the morning. So it's like NVIDIA in that respect have always been kind of ahead, but it's like AMD are trying to do better here. So I think Sony, Microsoft, they definitely had a big impact. Now I know for a fact because actually I can't say that. I could say why, but I can't say. I could say what I was going to say, but I can't say why I know it. But long story short, AMD are so influenced by both Microsoft and Sony. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you are employed working on a specific feature for an APU, and you are working for AMD. So I am AMD, I'm employing you, you are designing something for Sony, and then, I don't know, let's say you step on Mark Cerny's foot by accident, yeah, you're fired. Sony can get you fired for working on a project. That's how much of kind of a
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot of influence.
They've got a crap ton of influence. And there was also this. Yeah, and there was also this. I just wondering how much shit I'm going to get in later on. But there's also.
It's okay, Paul.
Hey, look, you already stepped in there. You might as well just jump all in.
Paul, we already going to get. We're going to get comments in the comments section. I know when the show wraps up, people are going to be like, "No, RDNA 3, it's not on PS5," because I saw it happen on Twitter. So yeah, it is.
But look, hey, I have a question for you, Paul. Let's just get into it. So we've heard a lot from other YouTubers about Xbox Series
real quick,
X
Slubbo.
having
we got super chat.
Okay, all right. Let
him finish his question first. He already started now.
We heard from other YouTubers about Xbox Series X having a significant power delta over PlayStation 5. Now, do you agree with that? And if you don't agree with that, why don't you agree with it?
Oh, can I just say that in the end, I don't care if people doubt my information because time and time again, people doubted me on July 7th for the release date of Ryzen 3000. What happened? People doubted me about Radeon 7 and what happened? Oh yeah, Microsoft.
Oh man, pop your chest out, man. That's what
I was pop your collar. I can hear him pop
Go ahead,
his
flex,
collar
bro.
right now.
Woo!
People doubted me
Pump
about
it up.
Comet Lake. What happened? People doubted me about lots of stuff. And you know what? I've had misses. It's fine. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I'm right, I'm right. It's cool. In the end, truth gets told, and we're all good.
Right.
Yeah,
I
the receipt-based industry.
Yeah, exactly. I'm happy to admit sometimes I fucked up. You know, sometimes misinterpreted stuff. I know in one video I was an absolute idiot, and I said that RDNA 2 had a 50% improvement when I actually meant to say 50% improvement in terms of performance per watt. But these things happen, and you make mistakes. You know, at the end of the day, you're only human. If you produce anything in life, I don't care what you do. You know, you could work in like a grocery store. No disrespect to anyone who does, but I'm sure ultimately someone somewhere has like mischarged someone, not because it's malicious, just because you're human. So if I make a mistake, it's fine. I'll probably make a dozen more within the next end of the year, so it's all good. But to get back,
I didn't realize that until I took human form about 200 years ago. But that's
Oh my god. No, go ahead, man.
Okay, so first of all, yes, Microsoft are definitely going to have a power advantage. It's like 300 watts versus 250 or something, for God's sake. No, I'm just joking. Microsoft won't catch on fire. It's fine. But no, being serious.
Hope not. We all know what happened back in 2006.
Yeah, we don't need another.
Don't worry, it's all good. It's all good. You know, I've got a bloody issue with that, might I add. When I was really sick with the flu and I had like Xbox 360, Alan Wake just come out, I was all happy. I was like, yay! Got that halfway through. I got Rid Ring of Death. I was pretty pissed.
Oh, wow.
I was
Man,
like, so sick.
Oh, that sucks.
You ain't throw that thing in the oven?
I tried it. It worked for like, I don't know, 30 minutes. And at that point, done. And I was so sick, I just didn't care. I was like, okay, yes.
He said it worked for like 30 minutes. That's about as long as it did work, too.
Yeah, just long enough to be like, hey, look, you're back in the game. Just long enough to get me into it. And then it's like, slap, no.
Look, man, I know people that did that literally just to. They say, I'm gonna throw this thing in the oven, throw it in the freezer, and then go on to GameStop.
Wow.
No, I know people that done that, man.
I would
I'm
never
going to
advocate that.
GameStop. I'm just saying, it's not like was not act like these people out here ain't no sleazes.
Yeah. Wow.
But answering your question seriously and not joking around, Microsoft do have a power advantage over the PlayStation in terms of raw compute performance. Anyone who disputes that, they just don't understand technology.
Yeah.
They do have a GPU compute advantage, simple as. But it's like I said in another video, I'm not trying to plug myself, but I basically stated that Sony made the system that they were intending to, and Microsoft made the system they were intended to. Both had different ideas. Basically, Microsoft wanted to create a system that had an overwhelming amount of compute performance. The idea for Microsoft is that they can let people just go ham. Do they want to do hardware ray tracing? Okay, cool, go for it. Do you want to do, I don't know, some other type of effects on the GPU? Cool, go for it. Do you want to do like downsampling or upsampling even? Okay, cool, go for it. Blah, 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 blah. Microsoft designed the system they wanted. Sony, meanwhile, designed a system which was essentially created to throw in as much data through the system as possible. So that is pulling assets from the SSD, which, yes, the SSD is fast, blah, blah, blah. But that's everyone focuses on that as if it's the benefit of the system. It's not. It's the symptom of the system. It's like the best way to describe it is that the GPU and the whole console itself has one design goal, and that is to get data from that drive and deliver it to your screen as fast as possible, to pull assets, which also means the GPU needs to run faster, because ultimately if it's running faster, the caches run faster, data can be processed faster. So the PlayStation has a performance disadvantage in terms of raw performance, but the Xbox has also less throughput. Which is going to be better? Well, what game are you doing?
So So like,
Yeah.
in a situation like where we're talking, because I think Coach talked about, it's like in an open world game, right, where you're loading a lot of things into the screen. Perhaps maybe the design of the PlayStation 5 may be more suitable for that kind of game.
Possibly, but there's a couple of issues with that. One, we don't know enough. I mean, we have a fundamental idea of the SSDs in both consoles. We do have a fundamental idea, but here's my problem. People are talking in very absolute terms because, one, we don't know the final production hardware yet. Like, until the system enters MP, mass production,
Exactly.
I do not take any spec as final. That isn't compute units. That is not CPU cores. But clock frequencies can change. I don't think they'll regress. But Microsoft, if they wanted a very easy win, and I say this in complete ignorance to how much headroom they've got on their GPU, but a very easy win for Microsoft would just be to crank up the GPU clock 50 megahertz, assuming they've got the overhead to do it. Now, there are problems. The higher you obviously crank the clock frequency of any part, the more power it consumes, the more heat it outputs. Heat, I don't think, is an issue for Microsoft. Because obviously their cooling system is really decent. And from what Spencer has said, it's as quiet, if not quieter, than the Xbox One X, which is whisper quiet. I mean, that thing is like, I was playing Shadow of War on it, and you literally can hear it like nothing. And that's obviously a big open world game. So it's really whether they're comfortable butting up against that 300 watts and maybe even going a little bit higher, because then it could get a little bit more difficult to kind of certify it for consumer use, to my understanding. But ultimately, the big thing for Microsoft is that they could get a lot of extra performance just simply cranking up the clock speed 50 megahertz. Sony could increase the bandwidth for the console by increasing this RAM speed. We don't know until it's final. Like,
Yeah, Paul,
we do know.
I don't know, maybe it was on this show, it was on Brap, and I was like, look, what we're doing right now is deductive reasoning. Assuming that these things are true, and assuming that these things are true, right now, all we're saying is what's true on paper. We won't know anything until the systems are out, and I don't mean the dev kits. Until we have the actual systems in our hands, all we're doing is saying, hey, if this is true, then this thing also has to be true. But it's also
Precisely.
Right now, we don't know. We can just tell you if A, B, and C, then D, E, and F, and it's that's it. That's as far as we can go.
Because I've got a question. Let's say Microsoft have two modes to operate the Xbox Series X in, right? They've got the 3.6 gigahertz, which is obviously SMT enabled. Then they've got 3.8 with SMT disabled.
Right.
So, okay, the disabled, the purpose is if you have a game engine which is not exactly the best at going over tons of hardware threads, basically, it's, let's say, for example, you've already created a game like Assassin's Creed Valhalla could be only operating with 8 threads. Maybe they've not optimized the game to go over 16 threads. I'm just saying that I don't know, just to be clear. But let's say that that's the case, and like, okay, cool, we want the extra clock speed. Well, does that alter anything else on the system at all? We don't know if it enables or disables a certain amount of cache on the CPU. We don't know if it affects GPU at all. We don't know anything. We're just guessing. What about overheads of the OS? Like, how do they compare? What's the overheads between the two operating systems? PlayStation 4, I know for a fact, and I can't say how, but I know for a fact that there was games that were created. I have to be very careful how I say this, but there were games created which had a very big overhead out for the PS4. And basically, very early PS4, you can Google this yourself, but look how much RAM early PS4 games were allocated for, for general use. It was like 4.5 gigs or whatever it was. And then obviously you had the whole flexible memory bollocks and blah, blah, blah. But basically, developers, as Sony started to optimize the console, they started to free up more of the 7th CPU core, but they also started to allocate more RAM to developers, right? And eventually, I believe there's a mode on the PS4, which means that a lot of features for the PS4 essentially are not running, but it allows, I don't want to say this wrong, but I think it was 512 megabytes is what's allocated to OS. and so the rest of the 7.5, I could be wrong. It could be 7. It could be 7 that's allocated. It's either 7 or 7.5, but all of the rest of it is allocated towards games. So that's a lot. That's a massive increase. That's like 1.5, 2 gigs, whatever, over the initial implementation of the PS4 dev kit. So I'm just saying, like, even back, do you remember even when Sony launched the PS4 and devs were like, we were expecting 4 gigs of RAM. Like, all of the early leaks for PS4, even up until almost the announcement, were all saying 4 gigabytes of RAM. The website video game leaks or VG leaks or something like that, they were spot on with almost every single leak. I'm talking like down to the bloody, like, you know, buses of the system. We learned about the onion, we learned about garlic. I was like, oh my god. Like, what has Mark Sony been feeding these guys? And they had like all of the Durango stuff as well, and all of them said 4 gigs. And yet, in the end, obviously, it ended up being something different. So until the final production hardware is out, I'm always very sketchy. Obviously, you can get an idea of how things are going to end, but until the final things that come out, we know what OS overheads are going to be like. We know what developers have said when they've gotten to use it. And I think it's quite interesting because if you speak to one developer, they'll say, yeah, the Xbox is the easiest console to develop for. No, PlayStation's the easiest console to develop for. Well, okay, dudes, are you developing on both? Do you have access to both dev kits?
Yeah, right.
No. So that's one thing. And second, what game are you creating? Like, what skill level do you have? What are you trying to do on the system? And I'm not. Also, what game are you trying to create? Because all of these things, what engine are you trying to do? Like, what engine are you trying to use? Are you trying to code from the beginning? Not to sound harsh, not to sound disrespectful, but if you're creating some like 2D like retro platformer that has like, you know, that could run on like a Celeron, like from like a Celeron 500 megahertz. If you're telling me that the game's easy to develop for on a system that has 16 gigabytes of RAM, a fucking SSD, and like, you know, 12 TFLOPS, if you couldn't develop that game on it, I deserve to drop kick you. I'm sorry, but people are quoting this stuff online like it's like some like revelation. A game that literally fits into the cache of the system. It's really easy to develop for. Well, no, really, you don't say. Shit, I wouldn't have thought that. I'm gonna take Quake 1. Gee, this is easy to run on my 9900K. This is amazing. It done an amazing job. It was only released in 1996. Shit. I don't need to be harsh to people, but people are quoting this stuff and misquoting this stuff, and it pisses me off because, like, people just want these buzzwords and they don't understand underlying reasons behind people doing this stuff.
Yeah, they're thirsty, man. Thirsty.
People act like, for example, the people at Microsoft are idiots. Like, oh, you know what? We're going to go with this SSD, and it's going to. I might as well just like send the data by a carrier pigeon. Like, Microsoft have done things specifically because it's what they want to do. They're not, you know, what do they think that we're going back to cassettes or something?
Well, we got to put the pigeons in this.
Oh shit! Look, the tape broke. Like, I mean, I don't understand like where they're coming from because.
Let you come back to the crumb side, man. This ain't right.
Hey, Paul, but Paul, I got a question for you. Like, I know it's funny you mentioned like people are quoting developers and stuff, misquoting things. We see that a lot, especially on Twitter.
Look at when Tim Sweeney, even Tom's Hardware, they misquoted Tim Sweeney. They literally misquoted him.
Yeah,
that was messed up when they tried to blame the YouTube personality for that, but. He's quoted exactly what was in the article, and people blamed him, but it was the article that actually messed it up.
It was the article. Exactly. Yeah, but like Paul, is there at least a general consensus have you heard from developers about these consoles in terms of, you know, ease of development? I mean, is there a consensus there that you've heard?
Yes, PlayStation's easier to develop for, but with some caveats. I'm hearing some mixed things about the RAM. Some people have told me that the lower bandwidth is a problem if you're doing a lot on the Tempest engine. which is obviously for audio. That I mean, Cerny himself kind of hinted this. He said that it can actually eat up a lot of bandwidth. I think he said 20% of the bandwidth just on the Tempest engine. The Tempest engine is essentially a modified compute unit of the GCN architecture, I believe. Basically, they've heavily modified it for audio processing. But I know that there's quite a lot of cache on the PS5's APU, but the problem with the PS5 to fully leverage it is the geometry engine. So basically, geometry engine does things like culling, which is one of the reasons that people say, oh, the PS5 doesn't have mesh shaders, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, primitive shaders, mesh shaders, they're all kind of the same thing. It's just branding and also how they're implemented on the GPU. And also, what we're not 100% certain of, including myself, is what functionality does the geometry engine have, for example, with culling, and also for setting up things like, primitive discard, whatever, that the GPU doesn't. And Cerny stated that some stuff is automated, but he also said that developers can get the most out of it if they're willing to really delve in. Now, what I understand, a lot of this came down to who has a PS4 Pro?
I do.
Every last one of us.
Okay, good. So you've played games like God of War, right? And you've heard it go like up, and you know what it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
You feel bad for the thing.
I feel bad.
You feel bad for the thing. Yeah.
Feel like the thing called a code.
Exactly. It sounds like
I literally had to put mine across the room.
Yeah. From my understanding, from speaking to people, one of the reasons behind that was that essentially developers didn't have access to be able to. I have to be careful how I word that. Okay, give me a second.
Oh no, you could. We understand how buzzwords fly around here.
Yeah. No, well, you mean you can imply it. It's, I mean, in Cerny's talk, not to interrupt you, Paul. But he brought it up
I don't
himself.
get in trouble. Yeah. No, well, it's not that. Cerny didn't say it. That's why I'm trying to be careful how I say it. Okay, so one of the reasons that Cerny designed the PlayStation 5 how he did is a lot of feedback from the PlayStation 4 and PS4 Pro. So with God of War, for example, on the PS4 and Pro especially, it could have been made significantly quieter to the console and much better performance if they had better programmability on culling on the GPU.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So the purpose behind the PlayStation 5 was to learn the lessons from the PS4 Pro, especially. There were some rumors that were actually flying around that the PS4, the PlayStation 5 was originally going to be like Jaguar based, and it was going to be Vega GPU. But I can tell you 100% that's rubbish. That's definitely not true. That is 110% untrue. AMD, yeah, that was a rumor. Basically, the rumor was that they were going to do that, but Microsoft made them scared for whatever reason, or they changed their mind because developers weren't happy. Because obviously, Jaguar, yay, that's exciting. And they just didn't do it. But to my understanding, anyway, this is 100% factually wrong. And I actually repeated that rumor myself, so I'm guilty of saying it because Komachi told me in DM, and not to throw him under the bus. He normally has pretty good information. To my understanding, it may have been a very early test kit that Sony were using to kind of figure out the specs of the PS5, but it was never intended for end use. In terms of the broader audience. As for the Xbox, the reason it might be a little bit harder is because developers need to fully leverage the wider GPU. Now, that's not to say the Xbox is hard to develop for. It's not. There's a reason that Microsoft even support legacy APIs like DX11. It's pretty easy to use. Mm-hmm. But if you want to fully leverage it, it's going to be a bit harder than the PlayStation. That's what I'm hearing. But it's not like the Xbox is like the PS3 with the bloody Soul processor. It's not like that.
Paul, let me ask you this. So if you said that they have automatic culling in the PS5 GPU, do you imagine that the Unreal Engine then takes its cue from whatever's available on the GPU of the hardware that it's running on? Or do you think all of that culling that they do is software based? Because they made a really big deal out of that and it looked really impressive.
what do you mean by the culling? Could you specifically give me an example? Or do you mean like in terms of nanite or
nanite, where we've got 15 billion polygons and we automatically cull it to 20 million for free without doing anything by the developer?
I don't 100% know the relationship because obviously even they've not stated exactly how a lot of this stuff works. To my understanding, it's based upon things like your distance from the objects and so on. So obviously it's taking cues of what's going on in the outside world and obviously things like render targets. Because ultimately, if you've got so many ridiculous number of millions of triangles on screen, if you're only rendering at like a specific resolution, you kind of get to that point where there's so many triangles on screen, they're not even going to be a pixel big.
Exactly.
You know, especially at certain resolutions and certain distances. If I had to guess, I would say it's going to be kind of a mixture. But remember, the whole purpose of culling as well is to discard things early in the pipeline so they're not even shown. That's one of the reasons that we're seeing things like, I think, and this is just speculation on my part, but I think one of the biggest changes PC hardware and Xbox has got is when we're seeing mesh shaders, because basically the long and short of it is at the moment geometry is not really handled in a way which is designed how GPUs actually work under the hood. Essentially mesh is almost like handling things as like compute shader, which is obviously a lot easier for the GPU to kind of like wrap its like noggin around. And I believe that the PlayStation can do kind of similar, but what I don't know is how it actually functions in terms of the geometry engine and how it sets work up for the GPU and how exactly it's fully leveraged. All I can tell you is that PSVR is really going to benefit.
Whoa, what happened?
I don't know.
I don't know what happened. I heard something ring or
because I'm really interested in PSVR. You saying they think they're going to benefit the most?
I think PSVR is going to be really interesting. I'm hearing that it's going to be critical if they want to. Obviously, depending on the complexity, obviously, as always with the scene.
yeah.
But from what we understand, I mean, you can look at patents yourself. But you saw that it has foveated rendering for the PSVR.
I didn't. What? What'd you say?
I said you saw that PSVR has foveated rendering.
No, I did not.
No, I didn't see that.
Okay. Do you know what? Do you want me to quickly explain?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
please do.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay. So I just don't want to be the one talking all the time. I kind of
No,
feel
no,
like
no,
I'm
no, not at all.
All right.
Not
Listen,
at all.
man, you're the guest. It's your day.
Exactly.
Okay, so basically, foveated rendering, it tracks essentially what your eye is looking at,
Mm.
and then obviously looking. So if I don't know where you are in your room, but let's just say for the sake of argument, you're looking at a fairly decently sized room and you're trying to look around. Imagine looking in the distance at the furthest object, but then with your brain, try to make out the detail of an object you're not looking at, which is in your peripheral vision. The quality kind of sucks, right? I mean, it does for me because I wear glasses especially.
Yeah.
But the reason behind that is obviously whatever you're focused on has the highest quality. Now, essentially, you've heard of obviously variable rate shading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So obviously with VRS, the purpose of that is that objects which are either being blurred by, let's say, motion blur or are like in the distance and obviously don't necessarily need such a high level of detail, which is what shading is obviously, it saves performance. Now, I'm actually testing it on Gears Tactics at the moment, and savings are actually pretty damn good. In fact, where was my performance numbers? Let me see if I've got them open. Yeah, so this is with ultra settings on a 2060 Super, 4K on a 2060 Super. I need to test with the TI later, but this is ultra settings with planar and glossy surfaces. So at 4K, it's getting 31 FPS. That's with VRS disabled, but with VRS enabled, it goes up to 40 FPS, which is a pretty big performance leap. I mean, that's my personal opinion. 1440p 2060 Super is getting 60 FPS. With VRS enabled, it's getting 70 FPS, slightly over actually 71. So the purpose of obviously foveated rendering is it rather than the developer setting what VRS is doing, it uses similar technology to VRS, but it instead tracks what you are looking at for VR, and that should improve VR performance as well. So obviously, Sony are putting. Pardon?
What's the name of this called?
Foveated rendering.
Okay, all right.
And the PSVR 2.0 is going to have this.
Yeah, you can look at patterns. The patterns will give you nightmares with the drawing of the eye.
Man, I can't look at no patents. I tried reading a patent, man. That stuff give me a headache.
I'll send you. I did make a video of it, but I'll send you an image later on. And it honestly, like the eye looks like nightmare fuel for me. Like I've got like most stuff, I don't get creeped out with horror, but anything to do with eyes, it looks like something's about to stab him in the eye. I mean, obviously it's not. It's just the way that it's kind of demonstrating what the eye's looking at. I was like, no, this is nightmare fuel. It needs to stop.
Nightmare fuel.
I'm just like, air. Yeah, so PSVR has that, and at least theoretically, I mean, from what I understand, it does. Obviously, a patent is a patent and doesn't necessarily become a product, but it's looking like it does have foveated rendering. Yeah. So Sony are doing a lot for this, and you can. I mean, they've even just announced that there's a beta being planned for Dreams VR. PSVR.
Oh, nice.
I think it's only for Europeans, which is ironic because I don't even have a PSVR. But Sony are doubling down on VR. Mm-hmm. They really want to push it for the next generation. I don't know, obviously, all the details, but we can see that they've been really pushing it with like the controller and everything else as well. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be curious to see what Sony end up doing. Microsoft, I feel like they could have a really big win with VR. Like if they could do a tie-up with like a PC headset manufacturer, but they just don't seem to want to do it. Like with Oculus, they kind of said that maybe in the future, but they just don't want to. I don't know. I'm not sure about VR. Like I think it's cool, but I'm still like 50-50 on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, what comes to Microsoft, I kind of feel like they should. They have some other, I think, issues they need to focus on, mostly with like just first party content and the quality of it, just flat out. I feel like they shouldn't spread themselves too thin. Although I do see how like what you mean if they partner with Oculus, and they're not exactly developing that; they're just kind of allowing it to work on their platform, you know, so to speak. But I think for them, it's they initially said VR was going to be supported or in some way with Xbox One X, and then that didn't end up happening. I feel like at this point, maybe it'd be something that they can be revisited like mid next gen. But I think like them to. Yeah, but like they got 15 studios, and they're still in a, as far as the gaming community is concerned, like a show me mode. Like show me. That you can make quality games on a consistent basis, right? Yep. So like go ahead and do that, and then work on VR next. I think, but see,
it's interesting because I'm hearing that there was some internal conflicts in Microsoft Studios, and you can kind of see some people departed, and I don't know if it's true. I don't honestly know if the internal conflicts are true, because obviously everyone likes to say there's drama behind the scenes when, you know, for all you know, the guy broke his leg and that's why he left. I'm just saying, no one really knows 100%. Yeah. But I think Microsoft are doing a lot better with this generation. The word is, anyway, they're going to show, and they're going to just like give a barrage, because I think what they've been trying to do, I think it was last E3 2019 that it was, because that's obviously when they revealed the Xbox, you know, or Project Scarlet at that time, and there was an interview with Spencer afterwards, and he said that they held games back because they didn't feel they needed them. And obviously we've had that, you know, inside Xbox recently, or whatever the event was, and everyone just like bombarded them because there just wasn't enough gameplay. And I think honestly some of it was because of COVID. That's my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but
that word, Paul, that's the only word you can't say.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. That's all good. So you think they would have showed more games if the pandemic wasn't an issue?
Maybe more gameplay. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. But ultimately, I think they just need to. I just don't think they can hold back at this point. Like, to me, this year is going to be the make or break for Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Sorry?
I said that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, it's like, I know people who love Microsoft, and the irony is, I am more of an Xbox guy myself. I love PlayStation. Like, I owned a PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4, PS4 Pro, and I love the PlayStation hardware. Like, every single generation, I buy it. But I think it's just because I'm a PC guy. That's kind of why I like Xbox. You know, it's just kind of like, oh, Microsoft. But even I have to admit, they started off so poorly with this generation. And I think a lot of it has to do with how their internal teams were just kind of gutted. Like, when Don Matrick was there, he was obviously pushing the whole media thing constantly. And obviously it was introduced in the Xbox, and they were really pushing that. And I think if Microsoft had been ran differently from back then, where the culture had been to push games, because remember, the early 360, it was actually kicking the PlayStation's ass.
Oh, absolutely.
It had some really impressive games.
Yep.
Gears obviously was just like a legacy at that point. Halo 3 was incredible, yada yada yada. Even games like Alan Wake were amazing.
Yes.
Like,
Lost
it
Odyssey.
was just incredible. Exactly. Even a Cameo, Elements of Power, it was like a sleeper game for me. Like, it was a launch game for the Xbox. And it was actually pretty fun and looks even amazing now.
Yep, I still have mine.
Yeah. And Microsoft have done better. Obviously, Gears Tactics is pretty cool, but I feel we all want new games that are new worlds. And personally, and I say this from my own personal perspective, I don't really play multiplayer anymore. Like, I went through this phase where I was like addicted to World of Warcraft because, like, my dad passed in 2007. So from like 2007 late until like 2009, like, WoW was like, it was like work and WoW were the things that just kept me sane, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, after a couple of years, I started to get heavily into CSGO. Sorry, Counter-Strike, not CSGO, because it wasn't released then. But I think at that point, I kind of just burnt myself out because I put so much time into raiding, like hours and hours and hours every day. Like, I came home, WoW, played until midnight, woke up, WoW again when I got home. And I think with that, plus playing like quite a lot on CS, I think I just kind of burnt myself out from multiplayer. So now it's all about the single player experiences for me. So Sony have just been really hitting it hard with the single player games. Like, Last of Us is going to be amazing. Like, yes, there's all the controversy around it, but we all know it's going to sell like crazy. Final Fantasy VII. Well, Final Fantasy VII, I think it was the best-selling game in April or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, and the best-selling game on PlayStation this year too.
Yep. And
yeah.
And
but I absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna say I absolutely agree with you about being burnt out on certain types of games. I think I'm burnt out on looter shooters now, and that used to be my thing for a good portion of the last decade. Was just playing loot shooters. I went from Borderlands 2 to Destiny to the Division, then back to Destiny, then back to the Division and Warframe, and it's just like at this point now, I'm just like, I'm tired of doing the same content over and over and over again, just trying to get like a better piece of loot to improve my character somewhat better. But really, what's the ultimate goal here? There isn't one. And just waiting for that next content drop is just like, you know what?
Yeah.
I could just be playing some of these other games instead of spending, a good, like almost like a side job amount of time on a daily basis in one game. I could be playing so many other experiences. Yeah, so I had to let it go.
That's because of your poor PC. If you upgrade,
wow, okay,
experience for you, man. Like high range.
Wow.
Dude, my PC is PC is well adequate to handle any game that is.
Hey man, if you have a low end PC, that means you get longer per frame to enjoy the fun.
No, look,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
messing around. I got
Yeah.
an i7 9700K with a 2070 Super. I'm good.
Yeah, Slow-Mo's doing work. Hey, Paul, I have a question for you. As we're talking about Microsoft, the Xbox, and this being a big year for them, what about PlayStation 5? I mean, they've been Sony's been somewhat quiet with regards to PlayStation 5, although we did see that Unreal Engine 5 demo that was running on a PS5 dev kit. What have you heard in terms of PS5? When we'll see the console games?
Well, I don't know the exact announcement date. I know it's going to be soon. It's going to be the next month or so. Some people are saying June, other people are saying July, but I don't have a source that told me one way or the other. I know that Sony... I have to be careful how I say this. So basically, from what I understand from people who I've spoken to who gave me a lot of the information, Sony know they're getting hammered at the moment on social media. They know it. They know they're getting kicked in the nuts with not showing the PlayStation. They know it. They know all of this. But here's the thing. They don't care. And you might say to yourself, well, that's ridiculous. Why the hell don't they care? Because they know when they show the console, people are going to just say, Mark Cerny, can I kiss your nuts, please? And can I just
Right.
like the console...
That's just it. I've heard the same thing from my sources.
Sony are going to bring a console... I don't know if you saw my video, but basically why Sony haven't shown the PlayStation 5. And the bottom line is they want to show a hand-produced... they don't want to show a hand-produced model. They want to show a mass-produced version of the system that way they know, or they can show that people can be confident that their system will look exactly like this, it will perform exactly like this, because it's very innovative. I don't know why. I think some of it has to do with the cooling solution, and we've kind of gone over that like a dozen times. The fact that the cooling solution is just not what you would expect traditionally for a console. But it's also the fact that the system itself is just going to be very different. And I think that Sony know that when they show the console off, any doubts they have, it's not going to matter at that point. Yeah. Microsoft are being still smart with how they're doing it. They're slowly ramping up the hype. But that's because Microsoft are coming from a less position of power. Microsoft, the way they're going to hype their system up is the games. Like, if Microsoft show, just for example, Halo Infinite, they show Fable, they show a new Perfect Dark, they show Hellblade, they show all of these games, people are like, all right, okay, you got my attention. It's kind of hard to ignore those games. But I think we all know Sony are going to have probably God of War. They're probably going to have, like, the big faithfuls. But they know that people are going to buy the console because it's the PlayStation. The PlayStation brand is just so strong.
Yeah.
I think Sony have been very arrogant in the past with the PS3. I don't think they're going to do that again. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope they don't, because that was not.
So you don't think they're going to price a $600 console just because the brand name is that strong, basically?
I don't know.
I mean, I would hope not. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be 500 at most.
Yeah. Real quick,
which is still a lot of money.
Yeah, I want to go to Al real quick. Al, what have you heard, man? Because I heard you chime in sources, and every time you say sources, Al, my ears perk a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I am by no means a tech wizard like Paul. I mean, just had to sit back and congratulate my man here. He just explained so much crazy, awesome stuff. So I am.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I am not on that kind of level of know-how and stuff like that. Let's just get that out of the way. But as far as what I've heard about console games coming and hardware reveals, it's all soon. I mean, I can point people to open sources that you can just find other information. Jeff Grubb is a great source of information.
Yeah,
he's a writer for The Verge. Awesome dude. I anticipate early June we'll see PS5 hardware. I will also put myself on the ledge and join Paul in saying that Sony will show the PS5 an actual unit. And I believe that they're going to show that unit running games
Mhm.
to prove what Paul was saying. I believe that the lineup is going to be incredible. I've heard a lot of things, and like Paul, I don't want to say exactly what I've heard because I don't want to say, oh well, Al said it was this, and I just know that a lot of crazy things that you probably wouldn't have anticipated are going to show up. I also want people to be well aware that Horizon Zero Dawn is not the only PlayStation exclusive game coming to PC this year.
No, it's not.
And it won't only be 2 to 3 year old games. People just need to be ready for that.
Could you drop some hints on?
I will say,
do I need a PS5?
without alienating or calling my sources out. If there's a franchise you like on the PS5 or PlayStation right now, it will be on PC.
Oh yeah.
Oh
now,
yeah, okay.
We've been talking about this for a while now.
Will it be on PC day and date?
I can't say anything more than that. I will look at Horizon Zero Dawn. Still doesn't have a date. Just says summer 2020 on Steam right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm buying on Steam.
I know a lot of things have been pushed back because of COVID.
You've said it.
yeah, I know. I said the word. I know whatever. I do know that there is a major franchise that is one dear to my heart. And I'm sorry, not a franchise, because there's only one game in this franchise. A IP that is very dear to my heart that is being worked on from a incredible PC developer for the port, and it will be phenomenal. It will break the internet when it comes out.
What?
Just one. Okay, hold on. All right. So
see, now everybody going to go check out his Twitter to find out what games is most endearing to his heart.
It's not hard
the rapper confirmed.
It's not hard to
Parappa
the rapper.
Yo, I wouldn't mind a Parappa the Rapper reboot, man. Someone needs to get on that, man.
That art style is phenomenal.
Kick punch, man. It's all in the mind.
So Al, I mean, I know Jeff Grubb said that in terms of games shown, maybe not as big as he initially thought. So maybe people, I'm just paraphrasing him. I think what he said is something to the effect that the reveal, in terms of games shown, isn't going to be as many games as he originally thought. So that's kind of scaled back a little bit.
I don't know. I have honestly heard a lot of things, but I know Housemarque's new game is going to be there. That's going to be awesome. And I think that's a day one.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is though. I have no idea. I don't think the code name is out there, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
We know Blue Point's working on something.
Yeah, I know Blue Point's working on something. There's been 2 unverified, and I've been making fun of them, leaks about Gran Turismo 7. I'm sure that'll be shown off. Gran Turismo looked incredible. The sport, I guess, was for the 4.
Yeah.
For the PS4.
It did.
I'm not a huge fan of racing games, but I respect that they looked incredible. I do like Forza Horizon though. But
I need to ask a question to Al and Paul, both or either of you. I don't care. But what have y'all heard about this thing that people call the Lockhart?
Okay, I do have something to talk about that. And my source is, again, everybody's source. Jez Corden from Windows Central was saying that he heard, this was, I think, last week, maybe a couple of days ago.
Yeah, it was recently.
Developers were still targeting Lockhart hardware, and I was taken aback by that because I had, up until recently, assumed that it wasn't a major push for Microsoft. But if that's the case, that's going to be a little bit interesting going into next gen.
I think it is going to be a major push because I feel like in the climate that we're in right now, and this is what I was trying to bring up yesterday before I got rudely interrupted by a person that will go unnamed right now. But I will.
No, you can say me. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't want whatever. But the fact that there are no systems available right now due to everything, Microsoft was already in the process of pushing older SKUs out the door by giving massive discounts on them. I don't think they're going to have those like X's and S's in the stores to be able to have guests come into the store and buy during this holiday. I'm thinking, and from what I'm hearing is the Series X is going to be their early push earlier, like October, late September, early October for their release date, and they're going to use the Lockhart as their holiday system. And if that's the case, they're going to have they're going to lead with the X, and then they're going to follow up the rest of the year until they can get enough stock of the X back in stock, and they're going to lead on that S system throughout the holiday, and that's going to be the one that's going to be available. You'll only be able to buy that system for the Xbox. You won't be able to get anything else. That's why I think it's going to be a very interesting holiday this year, because if PlayStation only goes with just the PlayStation 5 and there is no other version of a system, and we already know their supply constraint this holiday when it comes to making that system, where are people going to turn for a system this holiday? If Switches are going to Switches might be available because Nintendo does a really good job making sure they're available during that time of year. But unless everybody's going to jump back on PlayStation 4, if they have those available, PlayStation 5s aren't going to be around. Xbox is saying we're going to have that Lockhart there for people to buy day one when a holiday kicks off.
So Lockhart,
that's what I'm hearing.
This year for Lockhart, you're saying?
This year for Lockhart, that's what I'm hearing. This year, the X is going to come out first. It's going to be an early release, like around September, October. Who knows if that's going to be? Who knows if that's still going to be the case with the whole COVID thing? That could have got pushed out, pushed back, or anything like that. But the plan was, it looks like, to release the X first, and then use the Lockhart to subsidize the rest of the holiday for the remaining people. Because guess what? The people that buy systems the most during the holidays are the casuals, moms and dads that go out to get new systems for their kids that they want to get out there. And this is the thing that most people don't realize. People at a certain point will take whatever they can find. Like, yes, people call the stores every day looking for PlayStations. They say, hey, you got PlayStation? As soon as you say you don't have one, they say, okay, what about an Xbox? Because they don't really care. Like, these systems are going to sell out no matter what. It just depends on who's going to have availability during the time of this year. That's going to be the most sought after. And if you can't find one, you're going to buy the other, especially if they're all considered next-gen systems. So it doesn't surprise me that these developers are going to be targeting that, because that seems like, in Microsoft's eyes, that's what people are going to be able to buy the most of this holiday.
Yeah, real quick, guys, I got some super chats I need to get to. Coep 901 he had a $5 super chat, and I can't find it now, so I apologize, Coep. I do appreciate the support. We got another $2 super chat from Craig the Tech Guy. Says, please talk more about RDNA 3 and PS5. I don't think we could talk much more about that because we don't want to get Paul in trouble. He mentioned that pitchforks might come out, and so we don't want. We don't want Paul to...
I'm probably already pissed off. I'm probably at least pissed off at least two people. I'm sure I'm going to get messages from at least two people after this already.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually pissed off the entire of AMD once. So
yeah, I remember you telling me that they weren't too happy.
I bet you they
I
weren't.
leaked the Radeon 7 when I leaked the Radeon 7 renders, and basically for a while they didn't work with me.
Oh wow.
I kind of
they cold shorted you.
Well, let's just say this. It got to the point where I literally could not get like a $50 APU sent to me.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
How long did that go on for?
A while, and then to be fair, I basically I won't say who, but one of the guys and I talked, and we kind of just agreed I'll be a bit more careful with what I leak. Because essentially what they don't want me to do is to put a whole bunch of stuff out which can ruin their ability to be competitive in the market.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So just to be respectful to some people, I'm just a bit more careful than I used to be, which is bloody annoying, but it is what it is.
Yeah. We have another super chat. Everborn Saga with the $5 super chat. Thank you, sir. Says, I think Sony and Microsoft are both doing exactly what they need to do. Microsoft is building much needed hype, and Sony is increasing anticipation with their silence. We have a $3 super chat. Thank you from Emmanuel. Says, Optimus Code on here. Hold it down, bro. He's saying 12 is greater than 10. When I initially thought that, I thought that was Optimus's age he was talking about.
God damn.
What, the 10 or the 12?
No, the entire numbers.
Damn. What, 1012? Jesus.
HD Gamer 84, thank you for the super chat. The $8 super chat says, shout out to Paul, love his content. What difference in visuals and game design will we actually see given the respective strengths of each console?
I think it comes back to what I was saying earlier. I think that both consoles. Think of it this way: if you're creating a game and your app and you're like, just for say EA, how much really are you going to push the strengths of both?
Right.
I mean, let's be
That's a
honest.
good point.
With EA, you're lucky if the game actually works.
Oh!
So,
Frostbite.
I mean,
Especially if it's running on Frostbite engine.
Oh,
Yeah,
Frostbite
exactly.
is the worst.
I mean, it feels honestly like you'd rather have Frostbite on your genitals than actually play a game using Frostbite. It's like,
I love it.
And then
man,
what
that's
about
funny.
this? Who was the developers behind 2K20? The new wrestling game. Is it?
I forget,
yeah.
but it's horrendous. It looks like
He shouldn't be a
Yes.
part of the company no more.
yes, it's
It was
terrible.
like, yeah, your eyes are bleeding as you playing it, because I actually got it on PC and I took it around my friend's house. I literally have like a 3700X system that I kind of cobbled together, take it around a friend's house for like a gaming night, and we have like Sega Saturn and all this other crap that we're playing. And I'm like, yeah, let's play this wrestling. Oh god, this is bad. Okay, never mind. Let's play the PlayStation 2 version instead.
Wow.
But to get back to your point, I think that on average, AAA games are not going to leverage either console 100%. I think Microsoft are going to have slightly higher resolution, probably on average. Maybe the PlayStation will have a few more assets to stream in, but we'll have to wait on that. I think it's going to be the games that are being designed specifically for that console.
Yeah, first party.
I'm hearing the bottom line I'm hearing is that PlayStation games are less. Basically, both consoles will develop a look, assuming they're being pushed to their maximum limit. Sony's games will probably have more assets that they can stream in, simply because of the ludicrous speeds that the SSD can pull data in.
Ooh,
It's not
shout
that
out
Microsoft.
Spaceballs.
Yeah, it's not that the Xbox is slow. It's just that Sony's is like just ridiculous. Microsoft, on the other hand, can just go ham with like compute-based effects. So I think we're going to probably see better ray tracing, maybe higher internal resolution, maybe slightly better frame rates than the Xbox. But honestly, I think most games you're going to be able to really see very little difference, because obviously EA and its friends are not exactly the best at pushing consoles to their maximum. And also, I really would not pay much attention for the first year anyway. I think it's going to be like a year or two down the line that developers really get a handle on this. Because I do wonder, because of the current world situation and teams being forced to work from home, how many projects are being scaled back or not as optimized as they should be? That's a question and concern I've got. Like, how many developers are like, okay, you know what? Well, we were going to have full, scene ray tracing here, and we were going to also do this here, but yeah, we kind of can't do that now because like some of our graphics artists have fell downstairs or something, because they're working from home. I'm just saying that I think that this whole situation is going to impact some scale of some of the games, but we'll have to wait and see. And also because obviously a lot of the AAA experiences are also going to run on older consoles. And hell, some are even going to get Switch ports, for the love of God, which is going to be interesting.
Jesus.
Hey, Paul. The super chat that we missed was from Keop 901 was a question for you.
Oh, you found it,
He
someone?
wanted
Thank
to
you, man.
know- Yeah, he posted it in the chat again. He said,
thank
Paul, do you see dev studios creating a game like Crysis on the level of Crysis or on that scale on PC hardware besides Cloud Imperium?
Bloody well, hope so.
Me too, actually. Yeah.
I mean, I would love for them to. I think PC gaming is getting big enough now. I mean, to be really honest, back when the Xbox 360 was kind of new, Microsoft essentially let PC gaming be on the point of life support. Like, if Valve had not pushed PC gaming how they had, I don't know what the state of PC gaming would have been. And obviously now it's gone from strength to strength. AMD really did us all a massive favor when they pushed Mantle, because even though it was only for their own GPUs, it obviously meant the developers. Oh, sorry, Microsoft and Kronos Group were able to basically take a lot of the code and a lot of the principles of Mantle and then use it for Vulkan and DX12 respectively. And obviously they did a lot more besides that. But I think now PC gaming is in like its own era. I think that there will be maximizes what PCs can do. And I think this is a guess, but looking at what Nvidia are doing, I wouldn't be surprised, and this is not a leak, if I were Nvidia, investing heavily in this stuff and pushing it so that the PC versions just looked incredible, it makes sense. Or to empower developers or to allow developers to kind of have these experiences. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if PC gaming really has a resurgence, because honestly, PCs now are becoming a lot. The sales are just ridiculous. Like, even gaming laptops are selling like mad.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm hoping. I'm hoping so. I don't know if they will, but I'm bloody hoping so.
Yeah. We need way more developers on PC to just say, forget the lowest common denominator. I have a vision of a game, like kind of like how
Star Citizen.
What's the name of the developer that did the Divinity games, and they're now doing Baldur's Gate 3? Can't remember their names. No, not in Exile. They're doing Baldur's Gate 3.
Who it is? Yeah.
I can't remember.
They did the Divinity 1 and 2, and they said that Baldur's Gate 3 wasn't coming out on consoles, and people was like, well, why is that? It was like, well, look, the current gen consoles are not capable of running the game in the way that we have it designed, and that's just the way we like it. And I'm
Larian
like,
Studios.
Great.
Is it Larian Studios?
It is Larian Studios.
Everyone looked it up.
Well,
Yeah, we all looked it up.
Yeah.
I just walked over to the video game wall and saw it.
So Larian, like they said, this is how we designed the game. We don't want to compromise what we designed, and therefore it's not going to be on every platform. I'm fine with that. Games like Star Citizen, if it ever actually officially comes out, other games like where they're actually
they're making too much money off of people just dropping money in every week.
You ain't lying, like $30,000 shit.
People just dropping money in on that game, so we'll just keep doing this.
but just like games where you're not saying, oh, okay, look, all right, I know the majority of people are still using mechanical hard drives. We'll allow for that. No, screw that. Make your vision. If you want to make a game where the CPU and AI is like ever adapting to everything the player does, and every single game is authentic in that different way, if that's your vision for a game, then do that. If there is 98% of the hardware out there, the PC gamers out there can't run your game, if you feel like that's what you want to do that. Eventually, people will catch up. If they really want to play your game, they're going to upgrade their rig to play your game. Well, and I mean, like that's we always talk about the freedom of the PC platform, but damn it, show your freedom. Stop being, just common denominator guy. Oh well, everyone has
they got to make money.
So I'm just
I want a system killer. I agree with you 100%. System killers are the best.
That's the thing. So that's what I'm saying. That's why you pretty much
Crisis RTX could do that. The new Crisis with the remaster.
You
can actually do some insane stuff.
They did it once before. I mean, that was the whole. That's Crisis. So systems or for PC to see if people can finally get those benchmarks that actually did something. I think the engine was kind of tricking people. It was like, hey, no matter what you do, you ain't gonna ever beat what this game can actually do. But that's what it's almost right. They just need to really just say, hey, am I willing to just be a cog in this wheel, or do I want to be the actual wheel? And that's what most of these people aren't doing nowadays.
Well, it's not up to them. So that's the thing. That's why you don't get a lot of AAA games like that, because the publishers are going to make that decision, not the developers. And that's why you have the developers with the indie titles on PC, because the developer, if they're independent and they don't have a publisher to answer to, then they can do things like Star Citizen or whatever else they want, or if they try to self-publish, because at that point it is just the dev team and the vision. Once you have a publisher and you're AAA, you lose that ability to set your target, because then the goal is recouping the money for the
money that you put into development. Yeah.
Hey, real quick,
well,
guys.
Everything go back to money.
Yeah, real quick. I got a couple more super chats. Victor Allstein with the $2 super chat. Thank you, Victor. Says the 4 teraflop Lockhart will be an xCloud diskless box. And then let's see here. Got another $2 super chat from Victor Allstein. Says, do you think CryEngine will outdo Unreal Engine 5? I don't know. What do you think, Paul?
I honestly have no idea.
Yeah, that's kind of
I don't know what they got.
got
going on.
I would be happy to say more, but I don't think Unreal Engine's even provided a portion of what the features are going to be baked into it. Wow. I think they're playing possum. Also, just to add to kind of what that super chat was, or a portion of that, and also what we were saying earlier, or Al was saying earlier, there's a really interesting article from VentureBeat that Sony are not just betting on the PlayStation 5, and they were saying that Sony wants to push towards more cloud computing as well as like titles on other platforms. In fact, Yoshida said that over the last 5 years, we have verified that gamers do see value in the services in relation to PlayStation Now, and we've accumulated technology and patents to minimize latency. I think they're really going to be pushing stuff across as many platforms as possible. And personally, I think there's a chance that Microsoft are going to do very similar. I think Microsoft are just going to continue to just try to dominate in as many platforms as possible.
Yeah, and I agree.
First one there.
Yeah,
Yo, Enrique, did you get a super chat from Everborn Saga?
I did earlier. It's a $7 one. Yeah,
it was $5.
He
said, I think Sony and Microsoft are both doing exactly what they need to.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get caught up.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, cool.
Got another super chat from Manuel A with the $2 super chat. Thank you, Manuel. Says, if PS5 SSD is so good, why isn't it sold to PC? Why isn't it sold to PC and Xbox?
I'm not sure what he means by that.
Yeah,
it's custom to the PS5.
Yeah,
it's
PS5. Custom. So,
Linus Tech Tips, not to interrupt, but Linus Tech Tips actually found like 3 SSDs that you can get on the market right now that go up to the bandwidth that Cerny was alluding to that was not available at that time.
He did not find an SSD. He found a controller that had 4 SSDs operating in RAID mode that could do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense anyway, because once again, unless the technology is there to back it up, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, for example, as I was discussing,
I've said like 8,000 times, the SSD is only one component of this entire I/O architecture, but people still keep talking about SSD. Could you just go over that if you don't mind, please, sir?
Yeah, you're about to fight. He's basically asking you to fight his console war real quick on Twitter.
Oh God, I kind of went over it earlier that people look at the SSD and it's. I'm trying to be diplomatic. Okay, you know what? Screw it. I don't care about.
You don't need to be diplomatic. Just go.
Well, I was more talking to so I don't get like rage on Twitter. I don't care about
that's
you.
gonna happen anyway.
No, I'm just joking. But, to be fair, I'll get rage anyway. Now, being serious though, it's like the Microsoft people push the TFLOPS, right? And PlayStation people push the SSD. And what I keep saying to both is when you're doing that, you're actually not deliberately, but you're accidentally missing the actual big parts that are in the system, because ultimately, like, the SSD is essentially kind of like it's the symptom of what Sony were doing. It's the obvious point. It's like, you know, it's the easiest thing to kind of give you an insight into the design of the PlayStation 5. But the reality is the components inside the system, like Microsoft, for example, there's no point having an SSD if they didn't have the decompression technology on the APU, if they didn't have DirectX 12 Ultimate and sampler feedback and the whole velocity architecture. All of this stuff is part and parcel of the SSD. So I 100% agree. If you don't have the ability to actually utilize the data coming into the system, what's the point? And the SSD is great, but you need the memory to be able to actually, the memory bandwidth on the system to be able to handle it. You need the GPU to be able to read the data and figure out what data it's going to need. And remember, it's not just about the bandwidth either. It's about the time it takes to access data. It's kind of like, what I mean by that is that, and it's a crap analogy, but it's the best I'm going to do on the spot. But it's like, if you have a car that can go 200 miles an hour, but it takes like 5 minutes to accelerate, how great is that? Well, that's kind of throughput. That's the ability to, get lots of data in, but you also need to make sure the data can be quickly accessed, which is acceleration time. So if you have the ability to go 200 miles an hour and it takes 5 minutes to get there, that's not much good. But if you can accelerate to like 60 miles an hour in just a second, it's like very quickly, then obviously that's kind of the way to go. So Discord is going to be a bit weird for a second, so I don't know if you heard that.
No, that's a great example. I tried to use a Mario Kart example myself in the past.
They don't listen, Code. Code, they're not going to listen to you, man, because it doesn't fit their narrative, sir.
All right.
Yeah, ultimately, the bottom line is that what I'm learning is that people want a narrative, and they'll clip you. This is why in videos, and like even now, I'm being so careful with how I speak, because otherwise people will clip me, and they'll take a very small section and then they'll use that in a larger video to fit a narrative. And it's very frustrating because it's not an honest way to make arguments. And I think, honestly, that's one of the reasons that I got a lot of flack with the RDNA 3 thing, because people were pushing it as if I was saying that the Xbox GPU sucks and the PS5 is full RDNA 3, which is not what I said.
No, right. They use it for the console war as a talking point.
Exactly. Rather than like what I actually said, which is 1 or 2 features for PS5, and I don't know if the Xbox has it or what the Xbox has is it. And also, what it's like if you have coffee as like an ingredient on your GPU, another company could have instead latte, which is ironic because obviously that was a Nintendo GPU, but still, the point is that like it's an ingredient. You don't know if the GPU has an element or 2 elements that are merged together that kind of form a specific function. So the problem is we're doing a lot of guessing without knowing the entire architecture. Like, what exactly are the bandwidths of the buses on the console? And I don't mean the speed that data can come from the SSD. I don't give a crap about that. I'm talking about how fast can the data from the SSD go to the GPU? What's the bandwidth limitation there? Are there any problems? What's the latency? How can it access it? What's the API? What speed does the CPU connect to the GPU? What data, what about all this other stuff? Like, what bottlenecks are there? Are there any bottlenecks? We don't know enough about this stuff to be able to make any real any comprehensive arguments for one way or the other. And I think ultimately it doesn't matter anyway. Like, if let's just say for the sake of argument, Microsoft launch with Halo, they launch with Fable, they launch with like Forza, they launch with a new Killer Instinct, blah 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 blah. Sony are like, we've got Gran Turismo. No, obviously that's not going to happen, but I'm just saying, if one company just really fluffs it with the launch and the games are crap, would you buy it anyway? Like, why would you? Just buy the bloody system that you prefer, damn it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, well said. Well said, Paul. Paul, on that note, we do need to wrap up. Because my wife's already come down here looking for me.
Same.
Yeah. So, but no, Paul, I want to say something real quick. It has been an honor to have you on. Let me tell you, you have given us so much information. This is very informative. I saw some great conversations going on in the live chat. I want to thank everyone, by the way, the live chat, for stopping by and hanging out with us today, and for everyone who support us with the super chats. If you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing as well. But Paul, I just want to say thank you so much again. Very informative. I did drop the link to your YouTube channel, and please, everyone, check that out. But Paul, please let everyone know where they can find you on social media and YouTube.
Well, you can just stalk me on YouTube. So the link's there. Just search Red Gaming Tech. And sometimes channel partner Amy also produces the video. It's usually me for technical stuff, but she does it occasionally. She's actually with her boyfriend at the moment. It's like their 1 year anniversary, and I'm like alone because my I'm kind of like single at the moment, so I'm just like forever alone during COVID.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, well, I guess I'm just going to be like working all the time. That'll keep me sane. But yeah, to me, this stuff's just really fun. And being serious for a moment, I'd like to thank you for inviting me on. And I'd like to thank everyone who's obviously managed to listen to me blather for the last couple of hours. And also, it's really, to be honest, humbling to have any type of audience at all, because as all of you know, at the end of the day, if you don't have people who watch your content, you're kind of just, well, talking to yourself essentially in a microphone. So yeah, it's my privilege, not yours.
Well, thank you again, Paul. And you know what? When these consoles release, finally, we start seeing some games. We'll have to get you back on and talk about the releases and so forth.
May I ask one question for everyone?
Sure.
Okay. If you had one game that you could have on the next generation consoles as a sequel, what would it be? And you've only got one answer. I would say, just for everyone, if it's the PlayStation, it would be a Bloodborne 2.
Yes.
And for the Xbox, I would probably say a new Fable.
So it has to be an exclusive for both platforms?
It has to be an exclusive for both.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Why don't we go with
for Xbox? I will say I'm about to say Mass Effect 4, but that would be just like in general what I would want. But I would say Jade Empire 2.
That was a bloody good answer.
Or a remake of Knights of the Old Republic. Matter of fact, that's it. I want a remake of Knights of the Old Republic. That would be great. And on PlayStation, I want a remake of Xenogears.
Ooh. Okay. That's a good choice. What about you, Al?
Tongue-in-cheek answer or just me answer?
Whatever you want.
How about I do a tongue-in-cheek answer?
All right, go ahead, man.
Okay.
Well, one of them was already said. No, I won't say that one then. How about it's so hard to do that. Okay, I want confirmation that the Perfect Dark game comes out for the Xbox. I love that franchise. I love old Rare. I know it's not the same team anymore, but I think if the Coalition is actually doing it, I want to see that bad boy. Or not the Coalition. I'm sorry. What's the studio?
The Initiative.
The Initiative. Thank you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Freudian slip there. And then for PlayStation, tongue-in-cheek answer. How about a remaster of Metal Gear Solid?
Confirmed. Metal Gear Solid confirmed, everyone.
Quiet.
Wow. You know what's funny, Al? That's not the first time I heard about the Metal Gear Solid remake. So
a little bit more about.
Either.
I'll give you 15 more seconds of that rumor. It's not Kojima Studios.
Yeah, it's not.
The person involved has been mentioned in talking on this podcast.
And I know exactly who you're talking about. Woo!
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Yes. All right, go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna have to talk off here.
Yeah, that's why. I love having Al on. That's why I asked him earlier if he's gonna drop nuggets. Let's go to Gaby Forte.
Can we have Cerny please voice? Sorry, I just got to say, could we have Cerny voice like one of the guys on the radio for Metal Gear Solid? That would be amazing.
That would
He's
be
like
cool.
the tech guy. He could be like what's the guy's tech? What's the guy's name? The guy
I forget.
oh god, the tech guy. I can't remember his name.
Oh, Otacon?
No. Yeah, that's it. He could be Otacon. That'd be amazing. Imagine him explaining the tech stuff to you.
Oh
That would
God.
be actually amazing. That needs to happen.
We have this weapon here for you, and it's great. Just gotta use it. go ahead, Forte.
I mean, you guys already said some of the good ones. Xbox really didn't have that much that I actually want them to bring back or anything like that. So, like, forever it will always be Mass Effect. I don't care. It's not exclusive to any platform. I just felt like that game.
Well, the first one is.
The first one, just being able to have it redone in the essence of the third one and the fourth one, just in the way that it played, and keep that same story aspect with the RPG elements that they actually had built into that game, is something that I really would like to see fleshed out even more this next generation. So hopefully those rumors I keep hearing about them remaking that trilogy is true, because I think it would print money. But that's the only thing that I actually would really care about seeing that isn't already a thing that's already being made.
All right, cool.
What about PlayStation?
I mean, that's on both. I mean, PlayStation,
Yeah.
I already got what I wanted on PlayStation when they made God of War, because that's the only reason I bought. When I bought my Xbox day one, my wife, Xbox came out a week after PlayStation, and my wife was like, "Why didn't you come home with your PlayStation?" I was like, well, want to be responsible. She's like, "Well, you know you want to play God of War." Well, they didn't announce it yet. Well, you know they're going to announce it. I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Just go buy your PlayStation." And I bought my PlayStation, and it sat for like 2 years until God of War came out, and I was blown away. And they sold me a PS5 on the day that I beat God of War, God of War 20, whatever it was. So they already did that for me. So going down that road again would be even greater. But there's nothing else that they really can do. I'm kind of tired of Uncharted. Last of Us never really was that big of a thing to me, even though I did enjoy the game a lot. If I had to pick something that I would like to really go back and do, it would be the Resistance franchise. I feel like that's the only thing that they could bring back that I think they could do a lot better with. Or even the original Killzone. Can we get that? Can we get that look of the original PS2 look of Killzone? Can we go back and get that?
The man said one game for each, and you named.
I'm just saying, but I said Mass Effect at first. I said Mass Effect was for both. But then Slow-Mo asked me another question, so I gave another question.
You said Mass Effect 1, and that was only on the Xbox. So
yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. You got me on that one. You're right. Forgot about that. That's when Microsoft was good at giving us exclusive games only on their platform.
All right, cool.
Well, it was on PC as well.
Yeah, it was on.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, let's go to Code real quick. Code, what would you pick, sir?
Real quick,
Barbie Dream Adventure.
No, it's cheating, but
wow.
Xbox definitely go Splinter Cell, even though Splinter Cell was multi-plat associated with Xbox. And
the first one wasn't, was it? I think it was on PC actually. First one
was it? I played it on Xbox.
No, it was on.
It was on PC.
It was on
it was on Xbox, but it was also on the PC.
It was also on PC.
It launched on Xbox.
They missed so many opportunities with that game over the course of this generation to bring it back.
The last one was really good.
MS should have just bought the damn thing. They should have just bought the lock, stock, and barrel.
Every time I see the goggles and the light, the sound of the goggles lighting up with the 3 lights, it just symbolizes Xbox to me, and I just don't understand the whole thought process of why that's not a
Imagine how awesome that would be. All I'm going to say is imagine how awesome that would be in 4K with hardware-based ray tracing.
Woo!
Absolutely.
Oh my god,
ridiculous! So ridiculous.
That would be ridiculous. Man. Yeah. All right, Code. So what else? You got Splinter Cell. What else, man? For PlayStation?
On the PlayStation, I'm gonna do like Forte. I'm gonna give 2. It'll either be SOCOM or Siphon Filter. I'd be happy with either.
Which SOCOM? The original?
Yes, please.
Oh, I got you. The SOCOM 4 was trash.
All right, so
since all you guys are having all these others, I'm also going to say Parasite Eve.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yes. I didn't even think about that.
Since you guys are being greedy. Oh, screw it. I'm adding another one. And I'm also going to say Perfect Dark. Since all you guys are just adding them as you want, I'm adding more. I'm adding them. You guys don't listen to my rules. Screw it. I know what that's like. All right. That's cool.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, so for me, for Xbox, you know what? Actually, let me do PlayStation first. For PlayStation, I'm going to go with Siphon Filter. And for Xbox, I'm going to go with Ninja Gaiden.
Oh, that's a good one.
I thought you were going to say brute force.
No, definitely not brute force. Yeah, definitely not brute
Henry,
force.
That actually might be pretty good now compared to like based on
No,
how everything is now.
no.
You never know.
It's terrible. It's
no,
terrible.
Nope.
It would be a good game
It
pass.
wasn't just the visuals that were bad. It was just a bad game.
You
It
ain't
was
lying,
not a
bro.
good game at
They
all.
they hyped the crap out that game too.
The CGI trailers look great, but then you got the game, it was not good. So, all right. On
Enrique,
that,
I have a
yeah,
question.
go ahead, man.
Before we sign off. What has Itagaki been up to these days, anyways?
I have no idea, man. After Devil's Third, it's like he fell off the face of the earth, right?
I think Eric and I are the only people on the planet who actually had a good time playing Devil's Third.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I had a good time. I mean, it was a so bad it's funny and good.
Yeah,
It was great though.
I don't know.
So silly.
I mean, like Al, how great would it be to get Itagaki and the old band back together to make Gaiden, man?
Ridiculous. I mean, when Paul was talking about how Microsoft was on top of their game with the 360, man, the launch and exclusive games for the original Xbox were ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they had exclusive, and this is what I was saying on BRAP on Wednesday before we wrap up. I said, I'm so critical of Microsoft because I lived the launch of the OG Xbox, and remember, they had remember Toji from
They had
Software.
fantastic they had partnerships with Sega and FromSoft and all these awesome Togi, great games.
It was Togi. The first one was exclusive. I mean, it's like
insane.
I don't get it. So,
we had a guest on a little while ago. I can't remember who it was, but they said in regards to that, they said that like the reason why they lost out on so many deals like that, like their partnership with Sega, is that individual producers for Xbox had like those inroads, had those relationships with people, and when they left, they took those relationships with them. They weren't cultivated throughout the entire company. So a guy who is like the best friends of someone at Sega leaves, and he's like, Sega don't give a crap about the rest of the people there. So now that's why I think you see things like Phil and Matt Booty going overseas often to the East to try to like build up relationships, because they the mainstay people there. And if the relationship is with like the guy that's at the top, then other people switching in and out isn't going to have a massive effect on the content of games coming in.
Yeah.
Wait, I got one last question for Paul. I ask everybody this, Paul, and I ask everybody this when they come. Prices. What are these systems going to come in at? What are you thinking?
Who wants to go first?
No, we've talked about this.
I know the price that I'll say for both, but I don't know what. I mean, who wants to go first? I'll go first.
Go ahead, Al.
But I don't mind. I don't mind going first. If you want to go first, it's up to you.
Okay, I'll go first.
No one wants to go
first.
I'll go
Someone else go.
Go ahead, Al.
I think at one point, because things are always subject to change, and I don't want to say the C word. C word 19.
C word 19.
I think everyone they're definitely waiting to show their hands right now, but I'm probably banking on $500 for PS5 and $549 for the Xbox Series X.
Okay.
We'll see.
I think 500 for Sony. I think Microsoft are going to take the financial loss, and I think they're going to go for 449.
Damn, that'd be
Wow.
I think.
I
hope so. That makes it so easy to get both.
The reason I think they're going to do that is because they know they're going to get kicked in the shin in terms of the cost. They know they're going to lose money per system. But I think they're going to make it as tempting as possible. And I would not be surprised, and this is not a leak, just be clear, I would not be surprised if they bundled it in with Games Pass, which is either 3 or 6 months.
Oh, that's
To
a
get you.
guarantee.
Oh, I
Yeah,
think it's gonna
to
be a
get
year in
you
the box.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be. I thought a year initially, but then I was like, but that's 6 months is enough.
They're giving it away for $1.
Yeah, but they also want. Imagine suddenly then like they've got 5 million people that's given them the full price. I think they're going to probably want you into the ecosystem
true.
because it's only $1 for the first month, isn't it? Or was it first couple of months? It's $1.
It varies sometimes.
It
Sometimes
varies
it's
from-
$1 for 1 month. Sometimes it's $1 for 2 or 3.
They did 3's the most they ever did. 3 for
Yeah,
$3.
but once you're in, you don't get that $1
You don't
get that
thing
$1 no
anymore.
more.
I think that's the thing. They want you in their ecosystem because ultimately they know that once they've got you and you've got the Xbox, you're going to buy Xbox Live. You're going to buy Games Pass at the very least. And that's going to be a consistent earner for them. And obviously they make money as well with microtransactions and all this stuff. Plus as well, from what I understand, I could be wrong about this, so don't quote this as like verbatim, but I think Microsoft's controllers cost them way less to produce than Sony. And at the very least, this is probably going to be true of the next generation. So the fact is, if, for example, you get really pissed off at a game and you throw your controller across the room, that's only benefiting Microsoft. Or even if you need like a new controller. So like they're probably going to be like, oh, we totally didn't mean to make that boss so hard. We'll patch that, honest.
I also have heard that the DualSense is expensive. We're talking like $90.
Wow.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, it's super advanced. I mean, look at a set of Joy-Cons are $70 right now, and they're quote unquote old tech now.
That's true, man. It's a good point now. Yeah.
Well, Paul brought it up.
Yeah.
I think honestly they're gonna milk what they can from the peripherals. They're gonna milk what they can, because think of it this way. I'll keep this brief because I know we're running out of time. But if you buy a headset from Razer or whomever, a Razer headset does not cost $200 to manufacture. Yes, there's the R&D. Yes, there's the R&D cost, and obviously the things like shipping, marketing, and all that crap. But ultimately speaking, there's a nice chunk of cash going to Razer, and obviously there's licensing fees going to the Xbox team as well. So I think they're happy to sell for either the same as Sony or preferably less, just to get you to buy that system. I might be wrong. Hopefully I'm not, but just so I can say that I'm right. But
that certainly would be interesting if they came in cheaper than PlayStation. That would be crazy. Me personally, I think the Series X is going to be $500, and I think the PS5 is going to be $400, and then I think the Lockhart is going to be $300.
Oh,
okay.
I think Lockhart might be $250 to $300.
Cheaper the better. I hope Slow-Mo's right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's cheaper the better. Yeah. All right, cool.
I think we're going to see the Xbox One basically just become EOL, end of line.
Yeah.
And they're just going to replace it with the Lockhart.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, on that note, again, Paul, want to say thank you again for coming on and hanging out with us. Definitely appreciate it. Please check out Red Gaming Tech. Links in the description below. And again, Paul, we got to get you back on again on BRAP. And,
certainly.
And big shout out to Al, one of the OG panel members from back in the day. Al, thanks for hanging out with us, man. Appreciate it, bro.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Paul, it was awesome, man. You were pretty incredible to listen to.
Well, hopefully, hopefully we can talk some more soon. It's really fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was actually kind of nervous because I've never done this before. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to say? How many people are we going to piss off at the end of this? Where are the pitchforks coming?
You did great, man.
Yeah.
You didn't sound like you had never did a podcast before, so it's pretty cool.
You know, the first time I interviewed someone, because I did like email interviews, and then I won't say who it was, but there was a individual I was interviewing, and it was like the first time, and I was shitting myself. Like, oh my god, please don't act like an idiot. And then halfway, like, I was just calling him, and he was like, yeah, all those questions, like, I can answer half of them, but half of them I can't because of NDA and like we're not ready to release this information yet. I'm like, okay, so basically I have to create like filler questions for half of the length basically of the interview. Off the top of my head, this is gonna go great. So yeah, it's always fun to like kind of do things off the cuff. It's been a lot of fun though.
No, absolutely. Again, thank you for the time, and big shout out to Optimus Code for joining us today. Big shout out to B Money.
Run away.
Yeah, he had to hop off, but big shout out to B Money and Eric Jackson couldn't make it today. Hey, everyone, we'll be back next Wednesday night at our regular scheduled time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, big shout out to the live chat, and please, if you haven't done so already, consider hitting that like button and subscribing as well. We are out, everyone. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.